This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in a position I'm in. We'll never let the true facts come above board to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the Grotto leader? Don't remember the name. You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
Now these people are in very high positions, yeah. Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, episode 31. I'm your co-host Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we're back with another Q&A from the Grotto of Truth.
Yes.
For the Alwara frequency.
Yeah, just to shill Alwara, what you definitely should subscribe, not just because you'll get access to our, locked episodes, but also, you'll get to have access to the Grotto, which really is a huge perk. There's tons of, stimulating, interesting conversation on these topics happening in the Grotto all the time.
It is quite stimulating. I'm very impressed.
Yes.
I'm very impressed with the accolades.
It's hard to keep up with, honestly, a lot of the time.
It is.
The people are very active, always discussing and bringing interesting things to the table that, I haven't heard about, stuff like that. It's definitely a thriving and interesting conversation happening in the Grotto. So, shout out to the Grotto, and
these apps would not be possible without y'all, and
definitely they
and
would.
If you gain access to the Grotto of Truth, then to paraphrase Kenneth Anger, we're your puppet. So whatever you ask us, we basically have to address on these episodes, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I guess it can be exciting sometimes to be somebody's puppet. Better the Grotto's puppet than the CIA's puppet, like probably so many other podcasts.
That's nice. That's true. Yeah. Right. I guess it depends on the question. I mean, if we get one that's I guess you could subscribe to Alwara and try to push the envelope and see if you can answer the question that we won't address. But for the time being, we're batting 1,000 and we're taking them all on. So.
My philosophy is even if we don't address it, we will address that we are not addressing it, and I feel like that's a certain code we have to live by.
Yeah, I mean, depending on if the podcast gets more and more followers, then there might start to be a backlog, but we'll try to tackle all of them at some point. Our last Q&A was pretty long, although I think that. I think it might still hold our length record even when Bigfoot comes out. But we'll see.
Bigfoot reaches for it for sure. But if we do get a Patreon subscriber who slides into the questions sub chat and starts posting in any ancient Ethiopian scripts with pictures of Baphomet or Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande twisted into demonic postures, cursing us, then, I think we definitely would have to address it even then, but...
Well, we have, we would definitely bring it up if that happens, but we have Bismillah in the Subliminal Jihad workflowy, so we're protected. For a while, true. We were being cursed because I was having trouble opening some of our flow charts, it was after we had done a lot of heavy occult episodes.
True.
About 09A and stuff. So, but once we put the Bismillah in there, no one has bothered us. So
you're right. It's been working perfectly. So take from that what you will. But yeah, okay. So I don't know. Should we just dive in and like get started?
Yeah, let's get started. Let's definitely not pussyfoot around because we know how these things can sprawl. But we'll see if we can do.
We got some good meaty questions today from the Grotto. So would you like to start with number one?
Sure, I guess. All right, Trolley Snatcha, who I think we had fielded some questions from before, asks, my question is, what are Dimitri and Khalid into music-wise? What are, say, the 3 artists they have on rotation at the moment? Also, what was that haunting mumbling tune played around the first half hour of the 09A app? It's still bugging me, so I'm bugging you. Bonus question, apart from MK Ultra, what other program do you think never actually stopped? Okay, so this is really 2 questions in one, but we can answer all of them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I have, like, really bad music tastes. Like, Dimitri is definitely more of, like, a music connoisseur, definitely most of the music that you hear in the episodes is Dimitri. The Salem Witch Trial episodes, most of that was from an album that I recommended. If you listen to these, like, this weird, like, folk dude, like, this folk, like, historian dude, like, singing these old New England songs about, like, witch trials, like, from, so long ago that they were actually talking about, like, how the people were witches and they deserved it, that, like, I had just listened to that for fun, like, years ago, I just had that, like, I remembered that because I would, like, walk around listening to that for my own amusement. I think we were saying a little bit before that, a lot of the heavy rotation has to do with the podcast. Like, if I'm looking at my Spotify right now, I see a lot of Bigfoot stuff because I had been recommending some music for the Bigfoot episode. I have a UFO by Jim Sullivan is on here. He was, I don't know, I feel like he could be a potentially good episode because he disappeared mysteriously and, no one knows where he went, but his album is pretty good. It's got decent production values and some songs about or that have sort of an eerie vibe to them. That's here. I guess I was listening to the new Sufjan. I admit it. I didn't dig it a lot, but I did listen to it. It hasn't really been in my heavy rotation lately, and I don't listen to music every day or anything. So. But yeah, I liked the song "Video Game" off of that. That would be my cut from that album. And I was listening to "The Song of Our Maker" by Aled Jones with Sami Yusuf, which I guess is like a collaboration between Sami Yusuf, of course, who we know is like this kind of almost a little bit like he's kind of cringy by like normal standards. Again, like my taste in music, it's pretty bad. Like he's one of the better like Muslim like music artists, like as these things go, but he's still kind of cringy by normal standards. He's not like hardcore. He's very much like sort of like this dude. He's like very pop kind of. You can listen to it for yourself. It's pop by Muslim standards, I guess. But anyway, like I guess he did this collaboration with some like Christian singer, which is just about God in general. So I'd listen to that. So there you go. And then I was listening to some 3-6 Mafia for the episode that we did about that, when I was listening, like thinking of old songs for the Salem Witch Trial episode, I listened to The Devil's 9 Questions, or Riddles Wisely Expounded, which is a classic. I like folk music. I like sort of the mystery of folk songs, especially about that have kind of an eerie vibe, with these sort of topips. Like one album that I've listened to for years is The Wheel of the Year, 30 Years with the Armstrong Family.
Wow.
So yeah, you can hear their take on The Ghost of John, on John Barleycorn, on A Pretty Crowing Chicken, Lay the Bent. Lay the Bent is a great one because that is basically Riddles Wisely Expounded. It's about like these 3 sisters and a mysterious man comes to their house and he, basically is the devil in disguise, and he asks them these questions. I won't spoil the song, but you might want to listen to it, yeah. And I think their version, Lay the Bent by the Armstrong Family, is pretty good. But anyway, so yeah, that's my answer to the question. My music taste is, it's pretty eclectic, it's pretty bad. And I don't really listen to music that much because like it's hard for me to work when I'm listening to music, like to write. So it's like it's hard to focus for me. But yeah,
interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah, people cut different
ways
ways
with
with that.
it so much. Yeah. Like, well, yeah, I'm trying to. It's hard for me to like think of the right words in general, but like I try to minimize my distractions. But anyway, yeah. So that's my answer, I guess. Yeah, I think I addressed that pretty well enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know what that mumbling tune is. That you would know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just looking it up. Well, I guess did you say the 3 artists you have on rotation at the moment? If you have to pin yourself down.
Okay, well, I did listen to, well, I don't have, like, artists on rotation. I guess, I did listen to Taylor Swift's new album. I admit it. I listened to Folklore, which I liked. I think it's pretty good, like, for a Taylor album. Yeah, the one that I listened to most recently, I guess, was the new Sufjan. This is so, like, cringe and lame, and I also listened to the new Bright Eyes. I admit it.
Oh, yeah. I did, around the time that we started this, podcast, I listened to that one night, completely all the way through, and I remember being struck as, like, I was quite quite impressed by it. I thought it was pretty good. It's
definitely the best thing that he's done in a while,
In a while, yeah. But, and yet, I don't know if it's just the moment. I haven't gone back and listened to it once.
I don't know if you listened to the album they did with Phoebe Bridgers before that. It was called, like, something, it was somehow, like, long, annoying name, but, for the album and for the group, but he did, like, a sort of, a duet album with her that I also thought was pretty good, but yeah, a lot of his stuff has languished for a while, but I haven't listened to that very heavily. I'm just talking about, these are, like, entire albums that I kind of had to give a listen to. I was re-listening to, like I said, I was listening to Sami Yusuf's, old albums, like, a while ago. I was listening to his, The Center, his album from 2014, I guess I was listening to a couple days ago. But again, like, listening to music isn't, like, necessarily a daily routine for me. But, and I tried to listen to New Sufjan, but that also kind of fell away. Same with the Brightest album. I listened to that a couple times, but yeah, probably the ones that I actually listened to multiple times would be Folklore, The Ascension, and whatever that new Bright Eyes album was, although I forget the name of it even now. But yeah.
Me too. I can't remember the name of it either, but I remember it kind of capturing a mood in the pandemic, and it felt I don't know, it felt apropos. It felt like the old Bright Eyes that was kind of stirring shit up in the mid 2000s, because I did become a Bright Eyes head, I wasn't like Fears and Mirrors,
both
but
of
like
that generation. You weren't.
Yes.
Fears and Mirrors is the best one.
I know. I mean, it's great, but I first, like, I became kind of aware of him probably around "I'm Wide Awake It's Morning" and, like, when I was in high school. And
wow, you're not a real head then, I guess.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, I did see him twice. I saw him. I've seen him twice live in that period, and he was. I was pretty. I had a couple on vinyl. I had them Wide Awake.
Yeah, I remember you had them Wide Awake on vinyl. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I might still have it. I'm not sure. I might have sold it years later. But that was, and I remember him being, because it feels so weird and anachronistic, like a million years ago, that Bright Eyes was one of the few artists that really did kind of like tried to make himself kind of like this Bob Dylan artist in the 2000s against
that's what everyone
like
thought,
when the
was
president
that he was
talks to
Dylan,
God.
Talked about that, yeah. I mean, well, that's the thing. Like, he was a great lyricist, but what his lyrics were really about was like, what I think, and this isn't necessarily like, important or like good or anything, or like, like a good use of time, but his like lyrics about being sad and like being a teenager, kind of, or a young person, back like in the Fears and Mirrors era, that was what he really was a true auteur of. And I think that there was some of that sense of ennui and despair on Down in the Least Where the World Once Was, which was the name of the new album, which I have to look up. But
it definitely takes it up to like he's in his late 30s now, and he still has the ennui, but he's like, it still checks out. I think
when he did some of his political stuff, I felt like it was a little bit like, he was kind of out of his element. Like, I didn't really like When the President Talks to God. I thought that was like,
I didn't like it either. I thought that was probably one of the more cringy
even though at the time
songs.
I was like, he's talking to God, like, you think God is real, like, at the time I would have been like on board with the message of the song, but
I mean, I think he had some other ones that I think in I'll Wait a Wicket's Morning, you know, he sort of like painted with the colors of kind of this like anti-war kind of environment of the, and I think maybe my favorite of his, or maybe the one I thought was the most effective, was Let's Not Shit Ourselves from Lifted, where, you know, he's like, CBS, ABC, NBC, bullshit. You know, we're still the pawns. And he literally says, we're still the pawns in their game, like a direct reference to Dylan, and kind of I felt like he was really reaching for, but it's also about suicide, like a suicide attempt.
It's also an amazing narrative story about, like, you know, he tries to commit suicide and he sees his father in the hospital. Like, that's a, you know, really, that's a great song.
It's a kind of a great synthesis of those two currents in Conor Oberst. Right. And
for sure. And I feel like when, you know, maybe he got a little bit swept up in the new Dylan stuff, and I think also there was some drugs. Wow, this is really becoming a Conor Oberst discussion, but
it's okay though. I think you know, it's fine because I think
I think we were both really into him. We were both.
I think we have to acknowledge.
I was more than you. If you came in during the I'm Wide Awake era, you know, I love Fevers and Mirrors. To this day, I think Fevers and Mirrors, that's the most cohesive, and, like, you know, that's no skips on Fevers and Mirrors, you know, at all.
No, it's a great album. It's a great album. Yeah. And especially some of his early lo-fi kind of stuff is there's some really fantastic songs on it.
There is.
And for being such a young kid, making that kind of level of music was also, I mean, he did have the kind of weight of, like, being a prodigy. Also, I just, you know, tangentially, we're going through the whole Franklin episode the other week, and I just think it's interesting that Conor Oberst is from Omaha and was like depressive, like kind of on the outs, like you know, Catholic schoolboy getting kind of into trouble, and I'm not saying there's any connection between, like, Franklin. He would have been probably a little bit, well, I don't know if he would have been too young, but he would have been a little kid, like, in the 80s in Omaha. And it's always been an interesting link in my mind once I sort of knew more about Franklin, sometimes going back to Bright Eyes and those very young recordings and the kind of, kind of home on the range, like, middle American angst of, like, this young guy, and it kind of thematically, like, fits, even though if there's actually no connection to it whatsoever. Like, I wonder if Conor Oberst is, like, aware of the Franklin scandal, and if it kind of, like, informed him, if it, like, disturbed, I don't know, if it was it in the air in Omaha when he was young that gave him this extra gloss of, like, there's kind of this all-American kind of suburban dream is actually a nightmare, and it's horrible, and I just want to, like, run away from it and escape, and I have this, like, endless chasm of despair inside of me, and I don't know, like
I mean, maybe, like, he did have the Desaparecidos, you know, the, like, his sort of, like, punk project that was more political. I feel like there was maybe some vibes there, and there were some songs about, like, Omaha, like the gentrification, I guess, of Omaha.
Greater Omaha was one of the songs, right?
Right,
Greater Omaha,
Did you ever listen to any of the other, like, Saddle Creek records? Did you ever listen to Cursive, or
I was never really into Cursive.
A lot of people never made the jump to Cursive, but I did. Well, I saw them do their Ugly Organ, like, reunion tour, like, you know, it was years ago now, but it must have been, like, in 2000, like, I don't know, like 15 maybe, but that was, like, probably the best concert experience I ever had. It was, like, the one, like, truly, like, you know, dope experience of seeing a band live. But I was like, you were saying about the Franklin thing, I remember there's a song by The Good Life, which is, like, the side project of the guy.
Oh yeah.
Where
I remember that
you
song.
know,
I was a fan
Inmates.
of that song. Oh my god, dude! I have a whole. That song was like the emo thing. Oh god.
Well,
I'm not even gonna get into it. But anyway, like 2007, like, you might even remember. I don't know.
I loved Inmates in 2007 too. And there's a song on that where, you know, it's, I think actually it's even like a woman singing, and she's, you know, like, kind
it's like a breakup
sort of a dialogue between her and her lover about, like, they're inmates because they're, like, trapped in this, like, relationship that isn't unhappy. And she's saying, like, you know, why haven't you left me? And she's saying, like, she says, there's a Greyhound on Jackson Street. There's an airport in Council Bluffs. You know, like listing all the ways that like he could leave.
Yes.
And I'm like, how many like evil like pedo operations have been run out of that airport? You know,
out of the Council Bluffs airport.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but like
Paul
I
Benassi
definitely.
there.
Yeah, I definitely thought of that song, like, in all the mentions of Council Bluffs, in, the Franklin stuff.
Yeah. It's a fascinating... It's fascinating that they had such a robust little music scene with Saddle Creek. I've only been to Omaha. I've been to Omaha, and I only went there once for a job, probably like 10 years ago, and was just there like for a weekend, but got the opportunity to like go out at night. And my coworkers and I, we had a great time in Omaha. Like we went around to a lot of kind of boring American cities on the scale, like Concord, New Hampshire, Indianapolis, places like, Springfield, Massachusetts, like not the most exciting places, but like Omaha was like kind of lit. Like we were, and I that was probably right before I had ever seen like Conspiracy of Silence. So I had no idea that, we went to like the Omaha Steaks like house where Warren Buffett goes. And it just had this like kind of, down home, like, free range kind of, but kind of a scruffy party side. Like it was more of like a party town than I think any of us anticipated. Like the bars were popping in a big way. I don't know if we would have seen that one gay bar that Larry King and Rusty Nelson hung out at all the time, but we were probably right around there in like downtown Omaha. But I always had like kind of good, and then thinking about like Bright Eyes coming out of there, it was like Omaha kind of like punches above its weight in like kind of culture and like nightlife. And then I found out like, dear God, like they punch way above their weight in a lot of really bad ways. But yeah, it's Bright Eyes, formative influence. I guess just to get to like my taste in music, like you kind of alluded to, I select most of the songs for the interludes on the show, which, like, to be perfectly honest, is like one of the most exciting things that I get to. It's like a perk. It's like really fun for me to try to find, and I really do try to be as subliminal as possible in the kind of either historical or thematic context of like the music that I slip in there, even if like it's real. I'm really just picking it because the song title has like a pun that is like related to the subject we're talking about. But I really try. I figure, and thank God nobody has. We'll find out when we do. I'll get to that in a second. But like our Eagles episode, whether Don Henley will come after us and like force us to like delete our episode because we use
we'll see.
Certain Eagles songs. I had to record Don Henley's "They're Not Here, They're Not Coming" on my microphone, like playing on Spotify, because you can't get a version of it on YouTube to even rip. It's like that locked down. Like he's notorious for that. But I will say, I mean, that's just like, I don't know. I grew up like I had that kind of music taste in the 2000s, like very into indie stuff. I think in high school, like a lot of 60s kind of rock, like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Velvet Underground, like, the kind of typical, like, I don't know, like hipster starter guide to like good music or whatever. And then, obviously like Radiohead, who now I kind of, I don't know, it's weird. I've exhausted
it's so weird.
all
They were
feeling.
my favorite band in high school, and I never ever listen to them now. I love them.
Same.
Like, I love
I don't
them
know.
so much. Like, literally, like, I just love Radiohead so much. And yet now, I can't, like, care about it. I don't ever go back and revisit any of those albums. I don't know. Yeah.
No. The most I did was
weird.
listen to a little bit of Kid A, because there was some discourse around like the 20th anniversary of it, and some people there were some like hot take articles through like, actually bros, like Kid A sucks, and then other people were like, no, it was good, and people were fighting over it. So now it's like they even lost some of the critical luster of like whiny like white British boys just like, oh, the apocalypse, like, I don't know, or just like doing bleep
I still
bloop music.
think that like Idiotech is a good song.
Idiotech is great. No, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the albums are great. I think they are good albums and stuff. Like I can't really say anything for like, oh, this music actually is like cringe now or it sucks. It's just like, I don't know. It's even relevant, which is weird. Like they were on this tip of like technological paranoia in like the late 90s, like OK Computer, but for some reason it doesn't hit as well as it did in like 2004. Like it's you know, and I was really like, I actually got to see Tom York, like one of the first concerts I went to as a teenager was like the Bridge School benefit that Neil Young throws every year, where it's like for the school that he founded for kids with special needs, and everyone comes and does acoustic sets. Like I went to the 2002 one, which is like the most 2002 lineup ever. It was like the Foo Fighters, Jack Johnson, Ryan Adams, Tenacious D, James Taylor, Neil Young, and then Tom York by himself playing all of the electronic songs from Kid A and Amnesiac and Hail to the Thief on a piano, bro. You know, well, yeah, I mean, he did like
that he came out with too, right?
Atoms for Peace or whatever. I mean, he also has like cringy like political takes a lot of the times. Like, well, can't everybody just be a Buddhist or something like that? And like I love Pussy Riot. Like they kind of, I think maybe that's part of it. Is like they lost the thread a little bit.
Well, in high school, like their politics seemed like kind of arcane and just like, you know, like cool and like kind of like they were against the system, you know. But then like what actually does Radiohead stand for? Like, you know, I mean, it's cool they give away their albums for free, I guess, or did for a while. You know, I feel
that was the last album that I vibed with in Rainbows, and maybe their last album that kind of hit. I feel like
the vibing with that was a little bit forced. Like, there were some okay songs on that, but I feel like we all wanted it to be good. That's my take. Like, I remember when that came out, because we actually were friends at that point. We hadn't been friends for the prior.
We had just become friends. I think we had just become friends when.
And I remember like you were vibing with it, and I like tried. I mean, Videotape is good. The last track is good. I think you know.
Videotape is great. Yeah,
there are some good songs on that.
All I Need is like kind of good.
Yeah. But I feel like it was. You could see the decline starting to happen. Like it wasn't as good as. Even Hail to the Thief, which wasn't super great, like, you know, I feel like
I have a bigger place in my heart for Hail to the Thief, because that came out like in the middle of high school, like kind of the perfect time, and that was kind of like my Radiohead album as like a 15-year-old that was like, you know, I remember taking I had like a really wild driving instructor when I was 15, you know, when you had to do it to get your permit, and like I got him to buy me cigars for like me and my friends. I was like, dude, can we go to smoke shop? And he was like, I don't care, like if you learn how to drive, like we can do whatever you want, man. And I was like, okay, cool. You buy me cigars? And he's like, cool. And then I was like, can we go to Best Buy? And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then we went to Best Buy and I bought Hail to the Thief. Like, you know, and then I played it all that summer where the Iraq War was starting, and I had already seen him do a lot of these songs like on piano, and he did say a little bit like, this one is for the peace march today, and he started playing like There or something like that. I don't know, or Sail to the Moon, one of those ones, but it did feel like they were like standing up in their own obscure kind of way, their own occulted kind of way to you know, this new neocon like Bush Blair kind of you know, imperialist consensus that was happening. But then they did kind of just spiral off into like a K-hole of like making really soft, like kind of technically complicated like music on like the King of Limbs, which just kind of sounded like it didn't have any sweep anymore. And maybe that was just they were just victims of rock like falling by the wayside and not having the power or the capacity for like, you know, bigness that it had by the end of the 20s.
I remember joking for a while about how they had like 5 albums come out called like The Noodle Lord that like all sound the same, you know?
Exactly. It stopped being kind of deep, and it started to be like a kind of douchey guy in like a creative writing class who was like, yo, like look at how like allegorical I'm being, or something like exactly. I read Nietzsche, you know, like
it's true. It kind of reminded me of like the dude like in like our mandatory, at least like in the mandatory like filmmaking class I had to take in undergrad. I remember like there was this one kid who had like his own camera and knew like all these tricks when like everyone else was taking the class to be like mandatory, and like he would do all this shit, and like yet somehow he would like break the rules for the class, like, you know, like we weren't supposed to have dialogue in our movies, but he would always have these long monologues that were like immaculately shot and lit and everything, and like, but it was still like, you know, he'd be like, you need to redo this like because you like didn't do the assignment, like, and everyone else would make this like complete shit, you know, like it has that same vibe of like, look what I can do, you know, like, okay.
Which is fine. I mean, I've enjoyed Johnny Greenwood's scoring, and There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread and Inherent Vice. I mean, I think those have been kind of cool. I like that honestly more than I like Tom York's solo stuff, which is just kind of like
I never really liked the solo album. I've completely forgotten it. It was like Black Swan or something, right? That's interesting. Black Swan, you know.
There was a 2006
Black
one, I
Swan.
think. It's just a little too cold and remote.
The Eraser
and kind of
was his album.
The Eraser,
Black Swan
that's
was
right.
A single.
That's right. So I mean, that was Radiohead don't really vibe with them anymore. I will say that like in the sometime in the mid 2010s, in terms of like what I'm still vibing with today, and I think you've heard a few examples of it, like in our Soviet parapsychology episode. I got like really obsessed with like Eastern Bloc pop and rock music. It's really every type, every genre of like Eastern Bloc music, probably around 2014. Which I believe it stemmed. The initial inspiration was when we were riding around in a taxi in Irkutsk, Siberia, in 2012, and our taxi driver was playing Grupa Krovi by Kino, the Victor Tsoi group from the 80s, like a perestroika era Soviet rock group. And it really slapped, and I recorded some of it like on my phone, and like for a couple years I just had this like mysterious like recording of like a really cool like rock song, and like I didn't realize it was from the Soviet era. But I remember we asked him, like, who is this guy? And he was, like, kind of, like, he was really proud to, like, yes, this is Victor Tsoi, you know, or something like that. And I kind of wrote down, like, Victor Choi, like, Victor Chan or something like that into, like, my phone. But then eventually I, like, discovered the song, and that was, like, their big hit from, like, 1988. And then I went into like a huge Victor Tsoi phase, and which I think we could do a whole episode about him at some point, because some people in Russia have he died under mysterious circumstances when he was 28 in 1990. He was kind of like the Kurt Cobain of like the late Soviet Union in a lot of ways. Like that's the kind of level of like mythos that he has. There have been all kinds of conspiracy theories, like on the one hand that he was assassinated by the KGB, on the other hand that he was a CIA agent, whose songs were actually written by the CIA to like destabilize the Soviet culture, and that whole thing is like really fascinating. But then even when I started going back from the 80s into the 70s and the 60s, I've found like so many amazing artists, both in like the mainstream and in the obscure. I think I put Czesław Niemen in the last episode, his English version prog rock rendition of Strange Is This World, which was like his big hit from the 70s. He's a very kind of like Scott Walker type guy, kind of like big band, but then in the 70s he went, and it is a Polish singer-songwriter, in the 70s went in like a very trippy psychedelic prog rock direction. And I think I tweeted a long time ago when somebody who was like some lib resistance person who had like a Polish husband was like, my Polish husband's family told me that like if you were discovered speaking English, like you would be shot immediately in Poland or something like that. And then I discovered this like English language Czesław Niemen album where he's like singing the whole thing in English, and it's like it's incredibly like wild and experimental and shit, and it was totally sanctioned by the government. It wasn't like an underground like Samizdat record or something like that. So that was like a kind of epistemological breakthrough for me that actually tore down a lot of presumptions that I had about sort of the communist world in the 20th century. And I mean, definitely like tilted me a little more on the tanky path a little bit, because I realized that the Cold War on a cultural level, I did buy into the bullshit that I think, try to deconstruct on this podcast a lot, that, you know, for all the horrible things that, like, the West and America kind of, you know, did throughout the 20th century, for all the bad things that, you know, you know, that they were engaged in, well, we did kind of get, like, the upper hand in, like, arts and culture, didn't we? Like, we had the more exciting music in the 60s, we had these crazy films in the 70s, we had this, like, big spectacular culture, and, you know, if you believe the normative kind of myth of the 60s, you know, that was just, like, this organic thing that popped up, and even, you know, it was in opposition to, like, the status quo, but then America was free enough that we were able to kind of, like, accommodate it, and then, you know, reward artists very handsomely for creating their art, as opposed to the Soviet Union, where there was, like, you know, a troika of, like, evil Stalinists who were just like, "Niet," every time you wanted to, like, you know, paint something impressionist, or like, they had so much psychedelic music, but they didn't have, like, an LSD like, they didn't flood their country with LSD, but they still had, like, a really crazy, like, prog psychedelic bent, even to the pop, like, mainstream bands that were, like, very, very big, and all the bands that were on Melodia, which was, like, the single monopoly record label. And you know, I mean, they had disco. I think I tweeted about that recently. You know, they banned Western punk and heavy metal and shit like that for being satanic and promoting Nazism and hyper-individualism, but, like, they were very big fans of, like, disco and all these other really great kind of genres. So yeah, I mean, I think that was I took a couple years of kind of, like, getting less and less interested in both contemporary and, like, past American music, for that reason, except for kind of really marginal things. Like, I was a big John Mouse fan, an Ariel Pink fan, and I guess still am. They're kind of both, like, interesting artists, that kind of lo-fi stuff. I've also, like, dabbled in making music, though never in a kind of, like, even quasi-professional capacity. Like, the intro to this podcast is something I produced, and I think in the first few episodes, those are all tracks that I was making during quarantine this year. Just, like, on, like, playing around with, like, a synthesizer on GarageBand. So I've, like, dabbled in kind of, like, electronic stuff. I do play the guitar, not particularly well. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm in a weirder place with music nowadays, where not a lot of it really excites me. I guess, like, this month, I don't know. There have been a couple albums that seemed, like, decent this year. Just to be, not to make me basic, but, like, there was, like, a pop album that just came out that popped up on Spotify by Baby Queen.
Who's that?
Baby Queen is, like, a Zoomer, like, pop girl who released an album called Medicine, or maybe an EP, on November 11th, and she has, there's a few songs on it, like Internet Religion, Pretty Girl Lie, Want Me, Buzzkill, Medicine, and Online Dating, which are kind of like, okay, who's that, like, YouTube girl star that does the Billie Eilish voice that we, like, have kind of, like,
Olivia
made fun
O'Brien.
of before?
Yes,
Olivia O'Brien.
Yes.
So it's like, I don't know, it's like, if Olivia O'Brien... It's kind of like if...
So pretty.
Yeah. It's kind of like if Olivia O'Brien was, like, a more talented overall and a much cleverer songwriter, it would be like Baby Queen, you know, kind of. And it's, like, still kind of, like, mainstream, but it has a kind of acerbic, like, fuck my life kind of, like, thing with just, like, the modern world is, like, depressing. And I think she's British, so I did kind of vibe with that album, like, earlier this month. I've been going back and listening to the Blood Orange album, which was featured, like, really heavily in the HBO series We Are Who We Are, which I've actually found, not to get off the topic of music, but I found was one of the only, like, interesting and not predictable TV shows to come out this year, in, like, a very, very bad year. Yeah, but Blood Orange is, like, a critical part of the plot, and he even appears in it in the final episode, but the songs Time Will Tell, and a couple other ones from that album are something that I vibed with a lot a few years ago, and then was listening to this month, and like pretty good. And then of course like the subject that we are gonna like tackle in a whole episode is like for some reason like maybe about like a year and a half ago, I just got seized with a sudden like fixation and fascination and appreciation for the Eagles.
Yes, definitely.
And you know, yeah, you're aware of this. Like, I really went in hard on. I grew up listening to the Eagles. Like, my dad would play it in the car when we would drive around, like when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah,
like,
I guess,
knew
Springsteen was like that for me. Like, you know,
exactly.
I still love Springsteen. Same reason, you know, yeah.
For sure. And I think they are kind of, even though, you know, and this is interesting, we can talk about it like, you know, when we do an episode, but I think and we've talked about it on the Grotto as well. There's a few Eagles heads in there. And I feel like it in a way, I hate to use this term, but it's almost like the most punk rock thing you can do in this day and age is rep the Eagles. And like insist that they're like actually good and like deserve to be like held up in the pantheon because they are the number one selling band of all time in America in terms of their records. I mean, Greatest Hits Volume 1 is the best-selling American record in history, and Hotel California is the third best-selling record. I believe Thriller is number 2, and it's all over the radio. You know, it's so. I think that's why people kind of react badly to it, is because it's so ubiquitous in so many forms of media, and it has an association with like, I don't know, like corny boomers maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. It's like, yeah, but even back when they were around,
I got an
they
MRI
had haters.
one time when I was, when I was in high school. I got an MRI, and they like, I guess, can play like any kind of music while you're getting the MRI, and they played the Eagles. Other than that, I didn't really listen to the Eagles, but that's like my biggest association with them. And of course,
interesting.
And yeah,
well,
I never really listened to. I listen to Smuggler's Blues and everything, you know, like because of your recommendation and. You know, like the all-nighter.
Which might have been my number one Spotify song from 2019 was Smuggler's Blues. So when I discovered it, I've discussed before, like the Mina's Here to Stay connection, and the video is like so hilarious and amazing. And even though Glenn Frey made that awful song about like it's better in the USA that I put in the Target Is Your Brain episode, I just like, I love the all-nighter. I love Don Henley's like 80s. We probably will maybe either in the Eagles or the Grateful Dead episode, like his oblique reference in The Boys of Summer to Out on the Road Today. I saw a Deadhead sitting in a Cadillac. I saw a Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac. A little voice inside my head said, "Don't look back. You can never look back." And the Eagles, I think what draws me to them now is, when I played them for somebody last year, they described it to me. They had this like realization of like, this is like ASMR rock, you know? And I think that was like totally spot on, that there's something so like soothing and like calm about all the Eagles music, and it's like immaculately well produced. They got a lot of shit for that back in the day, but they were also like an amazing live band. They definitely, you know, they were probably the most accomplished boy band in history. I think they're better than the Beatles, but like, you know, come fight me, I don't care. And I think in a way that there's a way to read in a not quite Pynchon-esque way, but there's something like that going on with a lot of the Eagles music, in particular in like Hotel California, which is a song that is, you know, burned into my consciousness, but I could still listen to kind of over and over again today, because I think in this last run of Eagles Obsession, I realized that, you know, the occult kind of, I don't know, the whole narrative of Hotel California is so full of like kind of sinister references, and the fact that it is a metaphor for California, it's a metaphor for Hollywood, for the entertainment industry, for like, I don't know, the whole West in general, for the idea of this like this luxurious idea of America that is actually a satanic dungeon of like terror, where if you check in, you know, you can never leave. And, you know, even the references to, like, Steely Dan, who the Grotto has been talking about as having, like, weird Defense Department connections. He even, like, insults them. And Don Henley, who's, you know, the singer on that song, probably the most accomplished, the most formidable drummer-singer in rock history, not to put down Phil Collins, but I think Don Henley's obviously superior. But I think he is a kind of bitter person where he's like talked in interviews about the trauma of the 60s failing is like very central to the entire kind of ethos of like the Eagles project and the kind of songs they were writing. And there's a kind of preoccupation with trying to find yourself again and like get your feet back on the ground after your like young fiery dreams were like crushed by forces larger than you can comprehend. And that's why you got to take it easy. People misinterpret that as like take it easy was telling people to check out of politics and stop being political. Like it was a hard break from the 60s protest music, which we will get to in the future, was like has a lot of psyop elements that are like not acknowledged by like mainstream culture. But the Eagles get the blame for, as if like, Take It Easy came out and all the boomers decided to like stop protesting because now they could just take it easy and have a peaceful, easy feeling. And but if they had listened to maybe some of the other songs on their first album, like Take the Devil, where Randy Meisner warns you that the devil is always close. He's never far away. He's always close behind. And Witchy Woman, where Don Henley gets psyoped into falling in love with a witch who murders people. And a lot of, most of us are sad. Just a pretty, really great track. I don't know. You could just go on all day. And of course, Desperado.
Yes.
I have like a whole revolutionary hot take about
by
Desperado.
You, means I, but yeah. But yeah. Yes.
I just think, they are, they get a lot of shit sometimes for being like basic and not complex, but their songwriting is really like kind of virtuosic. And also, I mean, not only were they just kind of in general bummed about the 60s, but I had forgotten this, but actually Joe Walsh, who's the guitarist, who joined for the Hotel California album and, is, kind of the fun and crazy one in the group. He was actually at the Kent State Massacre when he was like a college student. And he experienced that directly, and then I think dropped out of college and then started playing music, and then, eventually found his way to the Eagles. So all of them kind of have this like this haunt, and it's also in the post-Manson era, which there's so much to get into with that, where they were kind of like, they came in the heels of this Laurel Canyon scene. I mean, they were signed by Geffen, who kind of put together all of these big acts in the early 70s, and kind of became like this hotshot working for Lookout Management. Don't know if that's related to Lookout Mountain Air Force Base, but there seems to be like this awareness of, somebody in the Grotto said a salient comment of, they thought that Take It Easy was kind of like an anti-cult anthem. Or actually maybe, no, I'm sorry, Peaceful Easy Feeling is an anti-cult anthem. Because it's kind of saying like, I know you won't let me down because I'm already standing on the ground. It's like cautioning you, and Glenn Frey sings, I found out a long time ago what a woman can do to your soul, but she can't teach you anything. She can't take you anywhere you don't already know how to go. So it seems there's these kind of weird illusions, and then the music itself is so calming. I just think like the Eagles they need to be reevaluated, and also, I mean, just to tie the knot here, I think that a lot of the kind of big mainstream pop rock in the 70s in the Soviet Union and in the communist countries, a lot of it sounds a lot like the Eagles, which I find fascinating and I want to get to the bottom of, because it's almost like by denigrating the Eagles and being like, no man, like the Ramones are where it's at, or some bullshit like that, that you are by proxy, like if anybody listened to like Pesniati or one of these like big band like pop groups in the 70s, maybe a sort of punk-pilled American person would be like, dude, that stuff's so corny, it's just like the Eagles. When in fact, that should be the compliment of the highest order. and a testament to the progress of the artist on the Melodia label, instead of in fact, just as a final thing, another band that was like very early on very big for me that I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm sort of out of sync with them, but they've come back periodically, is Nirvana. And an interesting little tidbit about, well, there's a couple things about Nirvana, but one thing that I found on YouTube a little while back was that they were performing at a concert in West Berlin the night that the Berlin Wall fell. And like they were interviewed about it and we're just like, yeah, man, like it was crazy. And immediately my like sus radar goes off. Like, why are they like in fucking West Berlin to like, you know, welcome the East Germans with like a psyop of grunge? I don't know. But also my even but so what Chris Novoselic said in that interview, he kind of said like it was cool that like Eastern, you know, German people were coming over and that like they were kind of aware. I think maybe they had even like visited East Berlin. But what Chris Novoselic said is like, you know, it just really sucks, man, because all the people in East Berlin, like their music is just like so corny, man. Like they're still listening to like John Bon Jovi and like kind of stuff that sounds like that. And so like I think like the wall coming down, you know, they like they'll have to do some catching up to like listen to like some real good shit, which I guess he meant kind of like punk and grunge. But here's the sus thing about that is that Chris Novoselic is Croatian and he actually spent 8th grade living in socialist Yugoslavia. He went there for a year to live with relatives, and he was exposed as an 8th grader to the absolutely flourishing and like totally, it might have to be its own episode, like Yugoslav dark wave was like an amazing kind of movement of like kind of post-punk music in the early 80s, and you could still find a lot of it on YouTube. But I guess he became influenced by like bands like Azra and the other ones are escaping me right now. But there were a lot of bands that almost sound like you play like a 1980 album and it sounds like 90s alternative rock in America. And you're like, whoa, like what the fuck? Like these guys were way ahead in terms of like the sounds they were developing. And Chris Novoselic must have been like he bought a bunch of like records and tapes and stuff and brought them back to America. And then there's even kind of a legend of like Kurt Cobain was like high school friends with Chris's little brother, and one day he heard this like dark wave like post-punk music like blaring upstairs and was like, whoa, what's that? And he's like, oh, my older brother Chris is like listening to like, you know, punk rock. And so he went up there and then he got like, you know, punk pilled by like Chris Novoselic, and then they became friends and started Nirvana. And I have no proof of this, but then I would like to think that like Nirvana heard some early Yugoslav dark wave records because they sound so grungy, but like we're way before anybody was doing grunge in America, and whether they realize it or not, we're actually influenced by music from like a culturally dead communist country to make their like iconic sort of form of like grunge power pop. And thus, you know, it's yet another example of America stealing the intellectual and artistic labor of like socialist musicians to create a psyop back home to get everybody to like, I don't know, do heroin and wear flannel. But anyways, that's good. That was quite a tangent, but I guess just that's some of my thoughts on music. Okay, we have been talking for 50 minutes, so I guess we should move on.
Well, but hold on, I do have some little tidbits. First off, I discovered a funny Radiohead anecdote here. In 2017, I guess there was going to be a Radiohead concert in Israel, and Roger Waters, Thurston Moore, Desmond Tutu, and Ken Loach signed a petition urging Radiohead to cancel the concert. And in a Rolling Stone interview, Tom York said, "I can't understand why going to play a rock show or going to lecture at a university is a problem. It's just really upsetting that artists think we are not capable of making a moral decision ourselves after all these years. They talk down to us, and I just find it mind-boggling. They think that they have the right to do that." York claimed the petitioners had not contacted him. This is from Wikipedia. This was rebuked by Waters, who said in an open letter in Rolling Stone that he had attempted several times to contact York. In a statement, York responded, "Playing in a country isn't the same as endorsing the government. Music, art, and academia is about crossing borders and not building them, about open minds, not closed ones, about shared humanity, dialogue, and freedom of expression." I can't believe, like, you would Desmond Tutu writes you a letter saying, don't do this. Like, are you fucking, like, and you're, like, a
Dude,
liberal.
yeah, such a lib.
this is another great thing from Chris Novoselek that he wrote in the aftermath of George Floyd. He said, he wrote on his Facebook, "Wow, I know many of you can't stand him. However, Trump knocked it out of the park with this speech. I drove from Oaxaca to Seattle, Waukegan, and to Seattle and back today, and have seen countless fellow Washingtonians on the road. I did not see any violence, but a Tesla supercharging station at an urban mall was closed off by police. Driving, I passed by regular folks who were already stressed by the COVID situation. Now, social media and television are looping images of societal breakdown. I agree, the president should not be sending troops in the state, and he legally might not be able to anyway. Nevertheless, his tone in his speech is strong and direct. I have been watching the images in the media and thinking about how polarized our country is. I mean, even wearing medical masks in public can be seen as a political statement. The violence, not the protests, appear as leftist insurrection. Imagine if so-called patriot militias were raising this kind of hell. If this were the case, left-wing people would welcome federal intervention. Most Americans want peace in their communities, and President Trump spoke to this desire. Never mind the legal details that few understand. Trump said he would stop the violence, and this speaks to many." Interesting.
Wait, who said that?
Chris Novoselek.
Oh, yeah. He also wrote a kind of cringy, like, we need to intervene to save, like, Croatia article in the early 90s.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like when he was still in Nirvana.
Apparently a big fan of Law & Order, and, he thinks it's important to stop the leftist insurrection. The horrible, dangerous leftist insurrection that we're now seeing the consequences of, where Chris Matthews is being guillotined in Central Park, etc.
Terrible.
The police have been abolished, just as everyone feared. It's anarchy everywhere. There's no police. And, I mean, now we even have President Joe Biden, who is obviously going to just overturn all of our values. I
guess so. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
There's some always is extremely effective. Yeah.
Well, I think one day we will. I think even the death of Kurt Cobain is something that does fascinate me a lot, true. And that's something we could tackle at a later date, and all the weirdness around Nirvana. It'll also be good to do after our Laurel Canyon episode, because Geffen was also the person who launched Nirvana like into the stratosphere as like the band of the early 90s. But I think we should start to move on.
Let me shout out one album that I think you guys might like, which is Songs from New Mexico by the Traveling Light Singers. That's like one kind of westerny, like Islamic music album. I think it might be a little bit accessible, and I bought that really hard maybe around the same time you were listening to Smuggler's Blues, but anyway, maybe that'll make an appearance on the pod at some point. But anyway, we can move on.
Okay. And just as a final thing, they did ask, like, what was the Ha-Hing mumbling tune played around the first half hour of the second 09A app? And I found it. It's the Chant of the Order of the Nine Angles, Lux Luna, by an account named Nameless Therein in the Scothorn Nexion. So if you look up, like, Nameless Therein, this dude does a lot of chants of that nature. I used a few of his chants in the 09A episode.
Was that the guy who committed the murder? Because I remember did we find that from his channel?
I don't know if he was.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but that was the one where he was like
had some 09A songs on it that we found because they were like, I don't know if the guy had made them, but they were on the channel of the guy who had committed but I don't know. This guy might be someone else.
I think he's just out there. Right. He's posted. This is posted on July 2020, so this guy is like currently active.
He's all about being a Nexion.
Yeah, exactly.
Into the Night by David Myatt. Cool.
Yeah, that's where I got a lot of. There's a lot of the songs on YouTube, and like I said, some of the music, it is interesting, but I also don't want to listen to all of it because I feel like it's satanically like brainwashing me a little bit. Like it's too good and kind of Anyways, I think
we'll return to maybe this topic because there is a Satan music question later on. But anyway,
but
we'll
this
go to 2.
Bonus. I don't know. We'll just go to 2 right now. I think we might. I don't know.
The bonus question. Let's do the bonus question.
Okay,
we'll just quickly do it. The Bigfoot program. No. I don't know. I guess definitely the UFO stuff has never stopped. I guess it's kind of a freebie though, because we know that to be true. Maybe I'll just say the Bigfoot program.
Okay.
I don't know.
I would say like CIA drug trafficking operations have not stopped.
Yeah,
CIA military drug trafficking operations.
Yeah, but
yeah. But I mean,
I almost don't think that anything actually stopped. Once it started,
not if it
I don't
works.
think that they would stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Even the psychic
sure.
shit, I have no idea. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it hasn't stopped. Because I don't think that. I mean, I think that there might have been certain dead ends that they haven't pursued. I think that's kind of difficult, like the remote viewing stuff, and like not very reliable. And I think that they might not, but maybe they are. You never know. Anyway, okay, we'll move on. Yeah, we've talked for 50 minutes. We'll keep going.
Yes. On Robert Anton Wilson and Discordianism. In passing, you referred to him as a psyop, and I believe that he and the subgenius people probably are, but I'm mostly in the dark about their history and impact, except that sus people were or are into them today. My question is mainly what they're about, what are their ties, if there's anything of value to them, etc. Okay, so
you're the one who really has the biggest axe to grind on Robert Anton Wilson.
I hate the Discordians.
I mean, they're definitely, like, lame. Like, they repulse me in the same way as, like, the Satanic Temple people do. I hate all parody religions, and I find that just to be intellectually barren, I just find it to be, like, a, like, very stupid, annoying, mentally stunted or closed off way to interact with the idea of religion. This is an interesting Robert Anton Wilson quote. Is. The idiocy of the word haunts me. If it were abolished, human thought might begin to make sense. I don't know what anything is. I only know how it seems to me at this moment. So this is interesting because I guess this is from the historical Illuminatus Chronicles. This is interesting to me because like, he's right that there's a lot, like, is something that's unexamined, but I really think that, Heidegger, who also was a Nazi, and actually, like, an enthusiastic Nazi, so I shouldn't necessarily be championing him as someone who's better than Robert Anton Wilson in any real way, but, I do think that his idea that the idea of being is under erasure and unexamined, and something that, we should turn our attention to and try to understand, rather than, declaring that we need to get rid of the word is, or whatever. I mean, a lot of languages don't have the word is per se, so, I guess then you would just learn in a language beside English, but there's always a concept of being, or to be. They're very various, but, again, well, that is God. That's when you get to God. That's when you get to ontology, which is a topic that people are afraid of because they want to do what he did, which is, like, have a generalized agnosticism, in his words, and just say, like, well, maybe, you can't know, which I think is just a very cowardly position, because like its refusal to engage with this thing that really is implied in a lot, like almost any kind of thought, which is the question of like being. And I think that, you know, and that's something, I think this maybe will come up in our next episode, you know, that we do for Alwara, which will be about the Ouija board. But, you know, this, I feel like this idea of the ontology we talked about a lot, and the, you know, the idea that, like, sort of parodying religion or rituals that are sort of meant to have, like, no effect, or to raise the question of what, you know, or not even to raise the question, to kind of baroque or parody the question of what is and what is not, like, or to sort of buck that question. I think that you know, that is just like a bad path. I think that it's interesting to engage with this question, because that's where like a lot of, you know, interesting ideological conflict is happening. And if we have to, like, you know, just pass the, you know, just kick the can down the road on this, it's going to be bad. You know, it's like, going back to our very, very first episode, like the Baphomet thing, you know? Like, if you really believe that Baphomet is real, like, you know, that people are like, oh, we can agree to disagree, or whatever. But I think that it is kind of important to talk about these things, and, you know, to really discuss this, and that I don't think that this question of is, or of being, is something that we really should get away from. I think it's something that we should, like, dive into. You know, the question of, like, what's real, and the sort of conflict that can happen with people's experiences and other people's ideas, their ontologies.
For sure,
their ideas of reality, etc. Anyway, yeah. So you probably have an idea,
to get to Robert Anton Wilson himself, just his back. I know he's been connected to a lot of things, which, like, I would have to go brush up on my research to, like, fully detail, and we will save it for kind of a full dive at some point, because he interlocks with so many different people that we've already, like, mentioned in passing. So, you know, he was also a Gurdjieff guy, sort of a little bit, you know, Terence McKenna. Friends of Terence McKenna, Jack Parsons, and basically, I guess, you know, after graduating college, he came from what he describes as a lace curtain Irish at last. I guess he was from a family that was kind of working class Irish that moved up to lace curtain Irish. And got really interested in, like, bebop, psychoanalysis, Bertrand Russell, Carl Jung, Wilhelm Reich, Leon Trotsky, and Ayn Rand, who he later repudiated. He studied electrical engineering and mathematics at Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute and English education at NYU from 1957 and 58, but failed to take a degree from either institution. After smoking marijuana for nearly a decade, he first experimented with mescaline in Yellow Springs, Ohio on December 28th, 1961. So he started to work as an advertising copywriter, and then he started working for Playboy, which I think Playboy is a whole kind of nest of, like, what the fuck is going on at Playboy. I feel like there's a whole kind of like Playboy sex kitten kind of weird thing going on. CIA agent,
friend of Allen Ginsberg, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. What I was gonna get to here, once he was working, and got a BA, MA, and PhD in psychology from Paideia University, an unaccredited institution that has since closed. I couldn't find any thing about that. I guess his dissertation was reworked and published in 1983 as Prometheus Rising, and he eventually he fleshed out a lot of articles that he had written at Playboy, and in the 70s published his most kind of famous work, which is the Illuminatus trilogy, which mixed, like, occult and magical symbolism in history, the counterculture of the 60s, secret societies, data concerning author H.P. Lovecraft and Aleister Crowley, and American paranoia about conspiracies and conspiracy theories. And the book was intended to poke fun at the conspiratorial frame of mind. And so that kind of became, like, really his stance, like his line that he would promote kind of throughout his life. But he was also known for being, like, endlessly, like, slippery and ironic. I mean, he was the ultimate, like, LOL, I'm CIA kind of person. Like, he kind of developed this sort of, like, rhetorical, posture that would allow you to be a kind of like, ooh, I'm just like, because he was also associated later on with something called the Discordian Society, which was founded in 1963, founded by Greg Hill and a guy who's very interesting, Kerry Wendell Thornley, who just want to point, if there's one kind of interesting thing about him, it is that he served in the Marines in the early 1960s with another young ambitious Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, they served for the same time in the same radar operator unit as Lee Harvey Oswald at MCAS El Toro in Santa Ana, California. There we go, Pynchon, Orange County vibes. Both men had shared a common interest in society, culture, literature, and politics, and whenever duty placed them together, had discussed such topics as George Orwell's famous novel 1984 and the philosophy of Marxism, particularly Oswald's interest in the latter. So here he goes, kind of like setting up this narrative of like Lee Harvey Oswald was a sincere Marxist. And here's what's even weirder about that. In February 1962, Thornley completed The Idle Warriors, which has the historical distinction of being the only book written about Lee Harvey Oswald before Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Due to the serendipitous nature of Thornley's choice of literary subject matter, he was called to testify before the Warren Commission in Washington in May 1964. The commission subpoenaed a copy of the manuscript and stored it in the National Archives. And here's funny. In 1965, Thornley published another book titled Oswald, generally defending the Oswald as lone assassin conclusion of the Warren Commission. Okay, so right away, like, you have Kerry Thornley kind of intersecting with Robert Anton Wilson. And this is a guy who served in the same unit and was like friends with Lee Harvey Oswald, and then wrote a novel about him before he supposedly killed Kennedy, and then afterwards wrote a book basically endorsing the Warren Commission. Like, okay, are you just being like are you just doing what Wilson calls guerrilla ontology, or what he refers to as, I think he is doing something that Wilson called Operation Mindfuck in the Illuminatus book, which outlined a set of libertarian and anarchist axioms known as Celine's laws. And I think, so like basically, these guys are just incredibly fucking sus. Like, I don't know any other way to cut it, is that they're doing this like kind of postmodern game of like researching conspiracies and almost telling you up front that like you can't trust us, like we are not reliable narrators, which then probably makes some people like scratch their chins and go, ooh, how smart, you know? And
it's all about who cares, like whether it is or isn't, like
you're right,
how things seem. Like, that's the guerrilla ontology, you have to just change it up, what he actually advocated E prime, which is like that goofy thing where it's basically English but without any form of the verb to be. So just instead of being like, oh, I'm 30, you say like, oh, I have 30 years or something, or like I have been alive for, oh no, it can't even say I've been alive. Whoops.
The French person would say like
30 years have passed since my birth.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's like more sophisticated and less, or whatever. Like, it's a more precise way of speaking to say 30 years have passed since my birth than to say I'm 30 or something like that. It's So I guess he thought that was super cool. I don't know. I don't know how sus he is. I'm sure he is. He seems extremely sus. I'm sure there's so much you could dig up on him. I haven't like read the Illuminatus stuff, so I don't really know myself, but I can definitely tell that he's lame just from a cursory look.
Yes, he's plugged in like literally with like all of the sussest like 1960s kind of psyop people like Timothy Leary. Yeah. He was instrumental in promoting him.
Allen Ginsberg. I feel like Paideia University sounds a little bit sus to me. I mean that
it sounds like something out of like a Panos Cosmatos movie.
or it sounds like something that Allen Ginsberg would have established to like promote like true Greco-Roman style learning,
like Elpida University, something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean it literally means like childhood, like
Paideia.
well, it's I think it's like the rearing or like the education, but it has a connotation of I think like youth or young boys, like I think I could be wrong. Again, my Greek is like very atrophied, but
it sounds like something MK New Age adjacent, and he got his BA, MA, and PhD from this non-credited like institution, and it's just. Yeah, he's. I get the appeal of wanting to be kind of into Robert, because if you're into any of these topics, it seems like, oh, this cool guy who wrote for Playboy has like written this book that kind of tackles almost like it's like if Subliminal Jihad were incredibly insincere. It would be like Illuminatus, because like we are talking about interdimensional ETs and Bigfoot and like secret societies and witchcraft and all these things, but we're not like deliberately trying to like mystify it and confuse and like misdirect people for I don't know what, for any kind of reason, the way that Robert Anton Wilson was quite proud of, bragging. And, it should also, it's worth noting that Wilson was a big fan of Timothy Leary's 8-circuit model of consciousness and neurosomatic linguistic engineering, which he wrote about in Prometheus Rising, and quantum psychology, which contain practical techniques intended to help the reader break free of one's reality tunnels. With Leary, he helped promote the futurist ideas of space migration, intelligence increase, and life extension, which they combined to form the word symbol smile with an I squared.
God. See, like, could this get any worse? I mean, like, come on, like,
This is creepy. This is creepy, and it's super sus. So I think we will like dig into him later, and he's somebody. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, at least I guess he criticized materialism, even though he kind of seems like an I fucking love science type guy. But he does.
Yes, he said he.
But I guess he's I guess he's more of a Lucian Greaves type person.
Yeah, or almost and also a little bit of a Noam Chomsky, because I see here that he critiques capitalism. He self-describes as a libertarian socialist, just like Chomsky, and but he says, I quote, "I ask only one thing of skeptics: don't bring up Soviet Russia, please. That horrible example of state capitalism, trot alert, has nothing to do with what I and other libertarian socialists would offer as an alternative to the present system." By the 1980s, he was less enthusiastic about the socialist label, writing in Prometheus Rising that he, quote, does not like the spread of socialism. So, I think that, once he saw the bravery of those mujahideen and Contra fighters, he realized the errors of his ways. And I guess even Trotsky, even edgy Trotskyism was too much for him.
Cool. A self-described agnostic mystic. All right, whatever. We'll do a whole episode.
Yeah, we'll do the whole thing. But rest assured, he's sus. He is sus.
He's definitely sus. Is there anything of value to them? Maybe, but seems
discovering
like,
what they're up to has value.
Probably anything you could get from Robert Anton Wilson, you could get like better somewhere else. I mean, why not just read like a real sincere occultist? Like you might as well. Like, you probably learn more. Like it'd probably be more valuable, and not just like. I feel like he's kind of like the Terry Pratchett of like like that's because I get the same vibe from this. It's like all like goofy and winking. Like why not just read Blavatsky at that point? Why not just actually read Crowley? Honestly, like why?
People want like an alternative media interloper to like to kind of hold their hand and walk them through it.
Exactly, and to say like this don't worry like about any. It's all just like fun and novels and like isn't it fun? Like and there's no again like the whole issue of the ontology of it is like like what if Bigfoot who can say, but like they don't actually engage with the ontological problems that like attend like a lot of these topics, which I think is important. But we
we will. So stay tuned for that.
Anything like flying spaghetti monster, like
is cringe.
touched by his noodly appendage. Incidentally,
I see. I do see.
Album,
yeah, right. The spaghetti limbs. I do occasionally see those, like, those kind of Jesus fish things that people put in the back of their car, but it's like a blob with like spaghetti appendages.
So
and it's
cool.
Like, yeah,
so epic.
Cool.
Wow.
So epic.
Yeah, that's
owned.
dope. Yeah.
Owned.
I notice on Twitter sometimes there's always like some person who's like, we need to make atheism cool again. Like, like it's a real shame that people don't, pay it. People on the left, like, can't understand that, like, the importance of atheism, and I feel like they always get ratioed or owned in some way, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I always find that so annoying. Like,
they've
you're
fallen
just
hard since
you'll always be spaghetti monster people. Yeah. Exactly. It's
they've fallen hard since their 2000s heyday when
they really had a heyday.
Were running around.
They really had a heyday. Yeah. And then everyone realized like Richard Dawkins is a complete idiot, and Sam Harris is like a Nazi.
Cool.
Anyway,
okay, so we're at like 1:17 right now.
All right, that's not so bad. That's not so bad.
Yeah,
all right,
it's not so bad.
And this is dedicated to anybody who went to the Peace March today.
Let's move on to question 3 from Joe Mama.
Yes, Joe Mama or Yo Mama, maybe. I guess probably Joe Mama. People say
or
that. Okay.
Ho Mama if we're going by the Buffalo Club. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he asks, or she, I guess. My mom asks, what about an episode / tangent about occultism and fascism in manga / anime / comics and superhero movies? I probably said manga wrong. I think it's manga. But anyway, as a longtime fan of both, and seriously slow on the uptake, I can remember my dad reading my copy of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns in 90, handing it back to me and going, that's pretty fascist. I was dumbstruck then, not having any real concept of fascism, and over the years it's been a lot easier to notice the occult influences on art than the authoritarian stuff, especially since I, like most boys, was transfixed at an early age by images of stylized violence. But once you notice, oh man, then there's this whole gay fascist warrior culture that ties in a huge way from Sparta to the samurai to, well, Top Gun. But the anime stuff could easily be its own episode. Think about it. We were just saying before we restarted from taking a break that, like, neither of us has really been, like, big into anime. Like, I did, like, I have watched, like, Ghost in the Shell. I think that's an interesting movie. Like, the, I think I even watched Ghost in the Shell, too. I watched Akira, obviously. That's very ESP stuff, like, they basically Akira, like, the whole, like, psychic nuke weapon, I feel like that's something that the CIA actually, like, believed in. Or that they were actually afraid of the Soviets unleashing, and maybe that they actually had tried to perfect on both sides. But, I mean, in terms of the superhero stuff, I, think that that's really salient right now, and I feel like we have talked about this a lot. We've seen the superhero stuff go from being something that was, considered to be like nerdy or something that people who were social pariahs were into, to be something that like, is
not to mention
like,
children.
Yeah.
Like it's for kids.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you were somehow maladjusted if you were into superheroes as an adult. Like if you like the comic book guy from Simpsons. If you were into like Batman and Superman, if you were like Kevin Smith, then you were maladjusted in some way. But
which
now
I mean,
I would.
Looking at his oeuvre.
Well, no, I don't think that that's necessarily untrue because. And I think probably, like, Alan Moore, who is probably the most, like, sophisticated comic book person. Like, there are people who will get held up as being, like, on his level, but really they're not. Like, Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman, like, aren't even close in terms of their sophistication. And I feel like Alan Moore is someone who acknowledges that aspect of comic books, that they are, like, sort of simple stories, and they have, like, there's a certain... morality kind of that's a standard to them. I mean, that's not to say, like, there's differences, he mentioned anime and manga, and I think that's very different. Like, there's a very big cultural difference between, like, the role of these things in Japanese culture versus their role in American culture. Like, manga can be, like, about anything, there's whole different genres, like, blah, 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 like, comic books in America, for whatever reason, are focused on, like, this, pretty formulaic, like, superhero storyline. Of course, there are exceptions, like, there's, like, Mouse by Art Spiegelman or whatever, there's, like, Robert Crumb or whatever, Felix the Cat, but there's, and I do think that even the superhero stuff, there has been a shift, because I do remember when this was in some way, like, subcultural, and I think that the, like, you could point to Alan Moore as an example of this, that, someone who's mostly retired from doing this stuff, although I guess maybe he does do some stuff, like, about, like, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or whatever, which, I don't know, but, like, anyway, like, but I think that the more interesting work was happening before it became mainstream, and now they're, like, these sort of, storyboards for these big movies, or, like, these, like, dumb things where they're kind of, like, vanity jobs for certain people. But I feel like when they were actually more subcultural or more sort of, obscure, considered to be nerdy, there was more interesting work happening in them artistically. Not to say that it was great, but that they were of greater artistic value before they became, like, the source material for these massive cultural touchstones for everybody.
Now they've gone so mainstream that it is the dominant culture now. They want us all to be kind of man-child fanboys in a way.
Yeah,
like into your 30s and 40s, and then brainwash your children into having the same brand allegiances to the same characters, so that they will grow up worshiping Soup and Batty and Spidey and all and Elsa and
of course Elsa, that classic superhero character, Elsa.
Maybe one day we will.
Elsa.
It makes me think of Elsagate, but like that's a particularly sinister and bizarre manifestation.
Like a superhero, like I feel like we could do. I mean, I remember I did read this one book called like Millennial Monsters, which was not about like millennials being monstrous, but it was about like sort of monster, like the monsters in Japanese pop culture, like Pokemon, Power Rangers, like the idea of morphing and evolving. And, like, the salience of this in sort of Japanese culture and the ideas around it, and how this is, like, a feature of commercialism, of course, like, all the, like, Gotta Catch 'Em All and everything like that. Like,
and Pokemon, it's interesting, Pokemon Go is used as a cover to do crowdsourced surveillance on mosques. Hypothetically, maybe.
But
I remember the addiction around Pokemon Go, even by like young adults. Like I remember the summer when everybody was like running around with their phones in front of them, and it was very bizarre.
Yeah, but that definitely did catch the American imagination as well in a big way. That was another crossover. And of course, Power Rangers, which is kind of like cannibalized from Japanese, what they call them, like Super Sentai or shows.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah,
and that was brought over here by extremely kind of sus billionaire impresario Haim Saban, the Israeli billionaire,
of course.
who was a huge popped up a lot in the Podesta emails and was a huge backer of the Clinton Foundation and was like very in tight with those networks and. Has his name all over all kinds of buildings and like the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles and, university wings. He's one of these billionaires that really throws his money around a lot. And it's like mostly from like his Power Rangers fortune and like toys, I guess. But like a lot of it really is just like bringing over these Japanese products and like kind of crappily turning them into American products and then, cleaning up. I was a big Power Rangers head when I was a little kid. I got caught in that zeitgeist for sure.
I liked the Beetleborgs, which were kind of a knockoff.
I remember the Beetleborgs.
They were shorter lived because they ran out of the footage. They ran out of the Japanese footage that they were using for the show. But that had kind
also
of
like VR,
a spooky theme.
Do you remember VR Troopers?
Yeah, my brother was into that.
It was more of a brief run, but I remember it being almost a little more. I'm curious with the VR and VR Troopers. I don't remember much about
virtual reality. Yeah. No, because I remember the bad guy in VR Troopers was like a billionaire or something who would like put his hand on a crystal and then he would go to virtual reality. Maybe that was they were signaling something to us. But there's this book. I looked up the authors, Ann Allison, Millennial Monsters, Japanese Toys, and the Global Imagination, and it goes into some of the stuff, like the morphing and how this participating in consumerism and the relationship of this to childhood and the alienation children experience and the way that they participate in these worlds through becoming sort of capitalized or consumer subjects. It's an interesting book. That's probably the most
they become toys
erudite thing I've personally read. Having to do with and we've talked about these things with man machine, that type of stuff. So, but I definitely think that there's a toyetic aspect to. The newer superhero stuff, I remember Batman Returns, of course, all these things are just, selling toys, Star Wars is another thing that's kind of been assimilated to the same brand. We wanted to do an episode about Star Wars being sus at some point. I'm sure we will discuss it.
We will.
In terms of the homoerotic warrior culture, again, I feel like you need to, parse this a little bit. You can follow these big trends, but there are certainly transformations, but there is an aspect of homoeroticism in a lot of these in maybe their warrior culture. I mean, even in the Nazi cultures around in the sort of SS in the Mannerbund, I feel like
homo nationalism going on.
Extreme
not
homo nationalism to
obviously,
the point of being. I feel like homo nationalism generally, in the Jazz Beer Poular sense, is the idea that our values, our democratic values, are superior, here in the United States or whatever, because to those of third world countries or those in the Middle East.
You can't be getting Gaza, letting the Navy SEALs march in the Pride Parade or something.
All the Pride parades being sponsored by these multinational corporations. We have to bring them to exactly
F-18s doing a flyby and leaving a trail of rainbow colored exhaust.
Exactly.
Kind of thing. That type of stuff.
For sure. I think that's the and I think that there might be. I mean, there was always kind of this. I mean, the seduction of the innocent. Well, that was the name of that book, right? Where the guy was sort of up in arms about the comic books and sort of the implied relationship between Batman and Robin. I mean, that is a little bit sus. What is Batman doing with Robin? I mean, I understand that practically speaking, he's there to give an audience surrogate, and so that Batman will have someone to talk to and explain the plot, so they'd be well, Robin, we have to go here because but at the same time, it's sus, Batman, why,
well, it was even satirized,
he's a billionaire, he has this weird orphan,
I know, it was even,
untoward. I feel in the Gotham community, people would be looking askance at Bruce Wayne. They would be wanting to. I feel that's not the best thing to do if you want to lay low under the radar, because you're secretly Batman. I feel you wouldn't want to draw attention to yourself by suspiciously adopting an orphan as a notorious unmarried bachelor. who's like a billionaire and lives like, you know, yeah,
well,
but
I mean, they seem made for each other in so many ways.
Well,
but
he
yeah,
was groomed. He was groomed by Batman, literally. Can a boy consent to being Robin? No, like you can't consent to being Robin.
I mean, I was never sure exactly if he was like 16 or if he was like 20 or something like that.
I feel like he's definitely at least 16. I feel like he might have been younger than that. Like
I guess the original Robin, yeah, not like Chris O'Donnell, but.
Chris O'Donnell, yeah, he definitely wanted to be Robin, and I accept that. But like, in other iterations, I feel like he, the whole coming of age, becoming Nightwing, that's like a whole thing. So I feel like that's I mean, Robin's the boy wonder, he's not the teen wonder.
So you're looking at like Bruce Wayne a little bit like Mark Holland's Rector.
Yeah, I am. Well, even worse in a way. Well, he's basically the Stifler in Chad's world,
Yeah, but just imagine like Batman in his gruff voice, like, and wherever you go, I'll be watching you. You're gonna lose your job.
And then calling like Commissioner Gordon and being like, Commissioner, this man like attacked.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's the only Batman adaptation I ever want to write. Is one where that really literally is like the only thing. And I've been in I've been in some rooms over the last number of years where comic book projects, maybe I'll talk about that at a later date, have been brought up, and I was encouraged to give my pitches, and really could not get over just the kind of bad taste in my mouth of the way that those movies are constructed and the kind of themes that are present in them. But it's like the irony is like the only ones I would be passionate about are like I don't know, like Superman Red Sun, where he becomes like a hero of the Soviet Union, or Batman actually being
in like Siberia instead of Kansas or whatever,
and becomes like Stalin's like best friend. Like that one would be cool, and also one that like directly subverts the entire idea, which like Watchmen, that is why it's so iconic and so enduring, even though they ruined it on HBO.
Even though it completely, totally. Like that show was bad like on its own merits, but it really had nothing to do with Watchmen. The comic book Watchmen. Like,
that was really the ultimate. Like it was taking the one famous property that is kind of
comic books as a medium, but really like. Everything you can say about comic books, you can say about TV. I gotta say, to be fair to comics, like TV is also incredibly stupid. But
probably
and that
worse
Watchmen
in its
thing was a million
pervasiveness.
times stupider than Watch. I just gotta say, it's nice that they tried to like make some kind of point about racism in America, but it just like didn't fit with like the rest of the stuff that they were trying to do vis-a-vis like the actual adaptation of Watchmen, and it just became like a mess. Like whatever, like
none of it added up, and they won a million Emmys, and
but it was it was so important. It was so important.
Okay. So there's a lot. Exactly. It was propaganda for sure, and so I think there's a lot there.
We're gonna do propaganda. Yeah,
it is. So, I mean, that's the other thing about superheroes in general. It's like Ubermenschen that are basically world police that fly around and fight like goofy straw men who always are just that evil and want to just like enslave the whole world or blow up the world or do something that like nobody but like the Nazis has seriously attempted to kind of do, but then it's always like flipped up. It's used for different purposes than like anti-Nazism. Even Captain America, who was like created in some kind of proto MK project to create a super soldier to fight the Nazis, ends up being kind of like fashy in his own right. And the idea in Watchmen, which was so great, which was like, Dr. Manhattan transforms into this being and then he gets used by Nixon to win Vietnam. Even though they dwell on that in the TV series, it doesn't like explore like the immorality of that at all. Like Dr. Manhattan doesn't even care that he like destroyed like Vietnam and made it like a U.S. state and stuff. They didn't really seriously explore the kind of fucked up aspect of that story, and instead kind of made it like okay in a way, because like the main cop hero like grew up in Saigon because her like, you know, dad was in the military and
was
like murdered by some
like,
VC
evil
terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. They were resisting occupation of their country, but like horrible. Yeah, but in Dr. Manhattan, like, you know, he was a black man. He became, you know, he became a POC. That's like another like hilarious thing that like,
that's a whole
you know,
Hamilton
like,
thing, maybe. That's the new alchemical. People are talking about it today.
Thing.
The alchemical transformation of a bunch of like slave owners into POCs, thereby erasing.
Is very interesting, especially in light of Dr. Manhattan himself. You know, being a character who's very much based on that idea of transmutation of elements, and his symbol being, you know, the hydrogen atom and all this stuff. Yeah, and the whole like alchemical thing. And that whole show was just like oozing with like the sort of racial like guilt complex of the Damon Lindelof, and like not really about like any like interesting engagement with a lot of this stuff. It was just like oozing with a kind of pathology that like is mostly like exclusive to, I mean, I'm not saying that like, you know, like people of color didn't like a response to the show, like they may well have, like, and there were maybe good parts of it, but I think that a lot of it was driven by this kind of Robin DiAngelo type thing that's like really more about, actually more about white people and like their feelings than it is about,
it feels
like,
incredibly
you know,
like
actual,
solipsistic and narcissistic, basically.
Yeah, like,
you know, it's this
well,
rich
you know,
LA
if
guy.
I make Dr. Manhattan black, like then that will somehow like you know, that will make me like better, like, you know, that will help me somehow, which like, I don't know, it's not really like, again, who cares about any of this stuff? Like, it's ultimately like not really important, like what race Dr. Manhattan is, which is kind of what I'm kind of getting at. Like, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, he's not real. Like, none of this is real. Like, there you go. Well, there's your.
Well, he kind of. I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, like he does it kind of super. He's kind of like walking around in like supernatural blackface.
Yeah,
because he adopts like the identity of a man who had been killed, and like she gets to choose like what kind of skin she wants Dr. Manhattan to like wear. And I forget if she picks it or he picks it, but they're like, oh, pick this guy, and then it turns into Cal, the you know, who's a black man, and then the show kind of like really like kind of wants you to like kind of applaud this and like be down with it, but it's kind of such a I don't know, it just felt a little icky to me. And
well,
like,
I think that part of what it is that Watchmen originally was a critique of this idea of like superheroes and like trying to show how like if this were a real thing, the people who participated in it would be like government sponsored spooks, like rich freaks, like
mass
people
murderers,
with
racists. Not to mention making like making the original superhero Hooded Justice, who was a like supposed to be kind of the most pointed kind of parody of that, which is like the original superhero in the 30s was a Klansman basically who was going around like beating up like black people, and then in the show they made him into a gay black man who beats up racists, and it's like
so I feel like it kind of I mean, he probably was. That's another like that's another thing aspect of Watchmen is that like, you know, a lot of the characters were like, you know, at least implied to have some kind of like homoerotic like desire that was maybe being sublimated into the costumes.
Sure,
but,
which is interesting.
You know, which is I feel like a thing, like the camp aspect of superheroes. You know, another Kenneth Anger connection. But like you know, so I feel like the original Hooded Justice was implied to maybe but anyway, like this is like all
that would have made more sense if like you explored that flashback where it's like this crazy racist superhero guy is like dealing with his repressed sexuality, and that's maybe like why like
it kind of got confused between like the critique that Watchmen was doing with this whole thing around representation, and it's like, oh, you know, it's subversive in some way and like brave to make like Spidey black, you know, or what if Captain America were black? You know, which I feel like would be like much more realistic also, like, you know, that they would experiment on like a black person, you know, but you know,
you gotta go all the way with it. You have to bring the history along with it if you're gonna do it. But that's the thing, I got kind of confused because I feel like the guy didn't really understand the material, like you know, and as a result he was like, oh, you know, it's subversive to take these icons and these heroes and make them, you know, POC, because then I'm like deconstructing these white icons, but the whole point was that they were not supposed to be icons. They were like a deconstruction of, like, you know, which some people say, like, you know, in the whole representation paradigm, it's not enough to be like, oh, we're representing
bad stuff, we're showing that like we're having this about
you have to show positive
people, and this is bad, exactly, like there needs to be
model
representation,
heroism,
and
it's
I think
incredibly
that there was like a lot of
incredibly
confusion going on with like David Lindelof's personal issues and like just not the right thing to happen with at all. It was a mess.
Exactly.
Complete mess.
So
and I'm very glad it won't be coming back, so I never had to hear about it again. But I'm sure there will be some new thing. Maybe Lovecraft Country, although I haven't explored.
Lovecraft Country has all the same problems, and it was done. It wasn't Damon Lindelof that did it, right? It was another Lost guy. It was Carlton Cuse, right?
I don't know, but
all these Lost guys are doing this now, and it's like it's almost like it got printed out by the same kind of algorithm of like adapt this material and then do these kind of very obvious kind of I don't know, that show has a whole problem where everybody just sounds like a 2020 BuzzFeed journalist when they're talking. Nobody sounds like a real person in the 1950s. Like they're all just having like the scene where the satanic white lady after Emmett Till is murdered is called out for her privilege, for like her white privilege. And I'm just like, how many ways could you write this scene with like a 1950s like black woman saying this that doesn't just like lazily use like Twitter language from 2020? Like, why do you make her sound like she's in the K-Hive? Like, this is ridiculous.
That's my favorite thing. Like, that's an old phenomenon, I feel like, in movies. The best example I can think of is like Maximus from Gladiator, who has like 20th century like liberal values,
but like reestablish a democratic republic.
Yeah, exactly. Of course,
stuff like that.
And
he's like woke, like
of the Roman Republic, which wasn't really like they did still have like Vestal virgins and stuff, and we're still kind of like a weird state cult like around like these sort of figures like but anyway, like
for sure,
like there's all sorts of examples of that. I mean, Braveheart like being about like freedom, like okay, stuff
give
like
me liberty
that.
or give me
it's gotten especially egregious with like the new, which I think it's good that like there's an like I mean it really is whether or not you attach any moral meaning to it. The fact is that they're responding to a market demand by an audience that isn't all white, and they want to see characters who are black as they are. And I think that's fair, completely reasonable. But that is a funny aspect of like a lot of this, especially with historical pieces where you have like someone articulating like Ta-Nehisi Coates' kind of like very 21st century kind of critique of like whiteness or that type of thing, like in 19th century England or something like that.
Which isn't to like deny that like those things were operative and were like things that are worth dramatizing in that period, but it's
we can't have subtext, like God forbid there be any subtext, like we have to have them be stated, like because otherwise people might get
has the vibe
if we represent something bad, then that's doing something bad. And except unless it's Baphomet, then it's fine.
Lovecraft Country
like,
even
racism,
does like dabble.
We're racist, but if you represent Baphomet, that's just fine. And like, how dare you? You're doing the Satanic Panic. You're doing Salem Witch Trials. Etc.
Well, there's no shortage of shows now that kind of like really embrace witchcraft and dark magic as like a cool like liberatory thing. So
of course,
So there's that whole thing, but anyways, like we could, I think there's a few tangents there that like
there's many tangents.
We'll talk about it at a later date.
On our like pop culture, like lame, like old like takes about like pop culture, but we'll save that for another. We'll probably do one about a couple of these things. I think that maybe one about I think that Japanese nationalism is an interesting topic. There's one guy who I've been interested in. I think Shumei Okawa. Shumei Okawa. I hope I'm saying his name right. But he was like a Japanese nationalist who did one of the first Quran translations into Japanese, and he was like a big time like Pan-Asianist. He's an interesting figure, and I think that would be like a good that could be a good potential subject, like some of these, maybe, you know, Mishima, that's like an interesting Japanese nationalist writer.
There's also one that I hear discussed periodically called Attack on Titan, which a lot of people have said is both kind of like pretty good, but also has the most overt sort of fashy, like Nazi themes going on in it, where there's like these gigantic, it almost seems like they're like Nephilim, but they're like gigantic, like Jew monsters that like roam the earth,
Jews?
And people live in these like fortresses, and these titans like come and
Jews?
Because they just look like a 4chan meme of like a evil Jew. I mean, you know what I mean?
Okay,
like they have exaggerated features that seem kind of like they kind of remind you of that type of a Nazi caricature or something like that. And I guess maybe there's other kind of like more Japanese fascist kind of overtones to it in a kind of sci-fi context. But anyways, like I haven't seen it, so I can't quite. Just a lot of people have said that, so I think there are some interesting things going on there.
Yeah, and obviously the whole superhero craze could be. Maybe we could do like a superhero film discuss at some point. We'd have to pick from the sea of them, which one would be the most interesting.
I mean, we could do well at the end of this month on Christmas, Wonder Woman 1984 is debuting on a streaming, I think on Disney
I don't know.
or HBO Max. I'm sorry, HBO Max. Wonder Woman is kind of whatever.
You know what, I'm gonna take a hard line and say maybe we'll do something with this stuff, but I'm not gonna get into the game of that's something that's disgusting me about other podcasts where they do an easy episode where they're we're gonna talk about the latest and they just become a fucking Marvel fan podcast at that point. You're just literally every single stupid Marvel Justice League thing that comes out, you give yourself a free episode. I get it, it's hard to come up with content, but come on, that's lame.
I think maybe it might be better to take a larger scope of maybe the history of Marvel or the history of superheroes as a genre or something along those lines. Because some of the things are. Right. They're a tremendous cultural experience, and they intersect with all kinds of things we've already talked about. But I agree. I don't want to just fall into doing contemporary reviews of the new blockbuster that comes out.
Exactly. That's so annoying to me. Great. And what makes you why would I care about what you have to? But anyway, especially when our takes probably aren't very unique. I'm sure a lot of people have are upset about these trends and but anyway
we're not alone out there, but
Star Wars also, but I think that actually is interesting because George Lucas has that sort of connection with the sort of milieu of LA and the sort of Joseph Campbell a lot of
Esalen.
And this is really a very powerful modern myth that has become part of that whole Disney milieu, so I think that can definitely be something.
I hate to be a buzzkill, so I cry and I cry and I just can't stop it. Well, I was changing the world, but got distracted by my telephone. In every crowded room, I feel unnaturally alone. It's like I'm living in a dream, but all the characters are me. I'm disillusioned by the world, and I'm filled with apathy. All of the cheaters prosper, and all of the quitters win. And he's your president because you voted for him. So when the party came to life, well, I imagined I was dead, and that's when I began to cry, and that's when all my friends said, oh boy, here comes the killjoy, chill the hell out, you're so young, just shut up, you're bringing me down, and parties are supposed to be fun, I don't wanna be a buzzkill, I hate to be a buzzkill.
Well, let's move on to number 4 now.
All right, this is from Bissell.
Mm-hmm. I guess I can read it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bissell writes, okay, so hidden wealth is coming up in the grotto, and this is a kind of question I've had for a while. Is the official story about how wealth is concentrated, e.g. constant trumpeting of Bezos and Gates trading places as the world's richest people, actually concealing a picture that's much more stratified? Do the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, or every other old money or other very old money families command trillions in wealth, as some researchers believe? Does Standard Oil still exist and own every major strategic resource in the Western sphere of influence? If so, where do those like Bezos and Gates fit into the picture? Are they just subordinates or even rhetorical punching bags presented to distract the public from an even more intolerable level of inequality than they can imagine?
This is an interesting question, because I think that you really have to, there's many layers here, because on one hand, like, yeah, I think that, well, it depends on what the official story of how wealth is concentrated is. Like, economics is something that, like, I certainly, like, am not, like, a trained economist, which I consider to be good, because everyone I know who's a trained economist is basically
it's a bourgeois pseudoscience.
And I know people who, like, went in to, like, you know, learn about it to subvert the system and then came out, like, being like, I'm a Christopher Hitchens capitalist, you know? Like,
yeah,
and, like,
exactly.
what the fuck? Like, you know, Invasion of the Body Snatchers type stuff. But... yeah, so, like, but that said, like, yeah, exactly, it's a bourgeois pseudoscience, and I think that, you know, within the framework of that, there's lots of different ways to understand wealth and capital, and, you know, capital is kind of, you know, a way, a representation of power or a certain cachet, and I think that maybe, like, these sort of, like, Forbes lists of, like, the richest people, like, maybe don't represent types of wealth or assets that you know, we don't have to know what their exact metric is, because there's different ways of measuring wealth that, you know, might come up with a different result. And I think that that is maybe where some of the stuff comes in. And I do think that, you know, these people who are wealthy, their extreme wealth, like, comes from somewhere. Like, I don't think you become so wealthy like Bezos and Bill Gates, like, to the point where you're not, like, in some way beholden to some other, like, larger power structure that, like, you're then sort of that you then become kind of assimilated to.
Yeah, you definitely don't exist separate from it, and I think even more than that, people have to, especially these guys in the Silicon Valley generation that we are told kind of came out of nowhere, that were just like middle-class eggheads with a dream and a vision, who, you know, through hard work in their garages, they always start in their fucking garage. Bezos and Gates both, and I think Jobs and Wozniak as well. You know, they always start in the garage, just like the Ramones. I remember there was a commercial back in the day that was like comparing like the Ramones starting in the garage and like Silicon Valley billionaires, and like how cool it was, and you know how punk rock it was. But you know, I think if you scratch just a little bit beneath the surface, you see how much help these people got, and how they really didn't come out of nowhere. Just like a lot of like the pop stars and like musicians and stuff in like the 60s and all that, they come from kind of like plugged in networks like Jeff Bezos's, you know, for example, I forget, it was either his stepfather or grandfather was one of the founders of DARPA. You know, and I think he was like a Cuban, I think he was like an anti-Castro, like Cuban immigrant, Miguel Mike Bezos, who he took his name from. He's actually, his real father was Ted Jorgensen, who is you know, exited out of his life. And he grew up in Houston, Texas, after they married into the Bezoses. And Mike Bezos worked as an engineer for Exxon. Talk about Standard Oil. That's one of the spinoffs.
Yeah, it is.
And then, here it is. Bezos' maternal grandfather, so through his mother, was Lawrence Preston Geiss, a regional director of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission in Albuquerque. So this guy did go on. He's also related to George Strait, the country singing star. So that's weird. Through his mother. So Lawrence Preston Geiss, was somebody who was like, you know, worked for the Atomic Energy Commission and worked his way up through the ranks of Exxon as a petroleum engineer and manager. He's actually still alive, born in 1915. He was an administrative assistant in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, joined the Navy in World War II, and later on the AEC and DARPA, ARPA. So like there you go, right there. His grandfather like worked for DARPA, and so this guy is not just kind of like just some nobody who came out of nowhere. And when you look at Gates, it's the same thing. William Henry Gates III was born into a family in Seattle where his dad was an incredibly successful and influential attorney, and his mother, Mary Maxwell, was kind of a well-known socialite and fixture from a very, relatively for Washington, like old money banking family. And she had a lot of connections. She was the first female president of King County's United Way chapter. She did a lot of civic activism. Both the parents were very involved in Planned Parenthood, like when Bill was growing up. She serves on the University of Washington Board of Regents. And here's what's kind of important is at the United Way's executive committee, she served most notably with IBM CEO John Opel, and then became the first woman on the first interstate bank of Washington's board of directors. And basically, there was a period where when Bill was coming out of college, in 1980, beyond the Seattle area, she was on the board. She would have been a great interlocked subject. She was on the boards of like tons of different banks and corporations, including First Interstate Bank of Washington, Unigard Security Insurance Group, Pacific Northwest Bell Telephone Company, which became U.S. West Communications, and Cairo Incorporated, which is the local TV station. Beyond the Seattle area, Gates was appointed to the board of directors of the National United Way in 1980, becoming the first woman to lead it in 1983. Her tenure on the National Board's executive committee is believed to have helped Microsoft, based in Seattle, at a crucial time. In 1980, she discussed her son's company with John Opel, a fellow committee member and the chairman of IBM. Opel, by some accounts, mentioned Mrs. Gates to other IBM executives. A few weeks later, IBM took a chance by hiring Microsoft, then a small software firm, to develop an operating system for its first personal computer. Wouldn't it be nice to have your mom sitting on a charity board with the chairman of IBM, who literally like passes your company's name along, and then they hire you to develop the first operating system for their first personal computer? Wow, yes. That's pretty lucky. And of course, we love it when parents, help their kids out. But that gets kind of like suppressed, and you don't hear.
We
and
love
then,
it,
once.
Folks.
We love it.
Don't we love it when parent help their kids out? Yeah.
And so, basically those are just two examples of like these guys having the most kind of insider connections possible for starting big Silicon Valley companies. And then of course, like you can't even disentangle anymore the kind of you can't disentangle like the interactions between like Microsoft and Amazon and like the US government, the military industrial complex, the intelligence apparatus. Like I think the CIA hosts some of their like cloud servers on Amazon Cloud Services, and not to mention whatever the hell else he's doing with like his rockets going into space, probably working with the Defense Department for that, and just Bill Gates, like the level of influence you have being like the software monopolist that gets to create basically the dominant one operating system that the entire world adopts like in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and still to this day is probably by numbers. I mean, more people do use Apple here, but their market share is like incredibly small compared to Microsoft, which I think has something like, I don't know. I know about 10 years ago, it was like 95% of the market for operating systems was Microsoft. So like, and then, Internet Explorer, like driving Netscape out of business. Like, they had that whole like monopoly suit from the government and antitrust shit. And, I mean, like, it's, these, so, okay, getting back to the main question though, it's like, where do they fit into the picture? I do think in a weird way that maybe they are kind of like front men. They are the face men. And, they validate a very classic American capitalist myth of like the normal guy that comes up with a great idea and works really hard and then dominates his industry and becomes a titan of industry, right? I mean, the Silicon Valley is really like a reboot, if you will, of the Gilded Age narratives in the late 19th century, where you had, you know, Jay Gould and Harriman and Vanderbilt and and Carnegie and Rockefeller and Morgan and all these guys who were lauded as like, you know, the masters of the universe. But I think, I don't know. I mean, I feel like back then, I don't know if it's too far out to say that I think they genuinely amassed those fortunes. And I think a lot of what happened in the 20th century was them kind of building out institutions to entrench their own power and influence that they had accrued in such a short amount of time. That's why you have like University of Chicago, founded by the Rockefellers, you have Carnegie Mellon, you have Vanderbilt University, you have all these kind of things. And they started basically getting involved in social engineering in the early 20th century, like in the first maybe two, 3 decades. And then eventually, I think during the New Deal era, a lot of them like went into government. Like Averell Harriman was, you know, the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union and was instrumental in kind of that, you know, building out the Cold War apparatus. And you had the Dulleses and all those people. So, I think Bissell gets to like an interesting point that, like, where kind of are the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and all these other people today? Like, where do they fit into the mix? Because they're definitely out there. They still have a ton of money. And at least with David Rockefeller, they were incredibly involved in the shaping of public policy in, like, the U.S. government, you know? Yeah. I mean, But you know, I just Googled them for a second and I looked it up and it said like what's the Rockefeller family's like total fortune, and CNBC in 2018 quoted it at around, or in 2016 it was quoted at around 11 billion, which like that's a lot of money for sure. But when you have Jeff Bezos running around with $200 billion, it, you know, by conventional analysis, you would say, well, like Bezos and Gates are more powerful now. But the Rockefellers have had like 100-year head start, and they're baked so deeply into, I mean, they've been doing the philanthropy shit that Bill Gates just started doing like 10 years ago. And Jeff Bezos has barely done any charity stuff so far. So I think that's usually a natural next step for these families as they accrue massive amounts of wealth. Sometimes some of them get into politics. Sometimes they get into more like cultural type of stuff. Sometimes they just go off and do a bunch of ayahuasca and become hippies and get into new agey shit. Like that's something the Rockefeller family is like deeply, I do know for like a fact that the Rockefeller family is like very into
well, you heard that
like
from that
psychedelics.
shaman. Well, you heard that from. I don't know if it's for a fact.
I don't want to go into the shaman right now, but it wasn't just from the shaman. It was from a lot of people around the shaman. It was from people that were.
I believe it, but you know.
It was from other people too. It wasn't just from him. Yeah. There's reason to believe that is true, and for that matter, Bill Gates as well is very into that kind of thing, even though he doesn't publicly talk about it, and maybe some other big, very wealthy billionaire people. And I just think it's one of the personal observations in my life was that, like, why haven't these people, I don't know, decided that like rapacious global capitalism is like not the way forward, from, you know, if they're having all these spiritual revelations, maybe, you know, I mean, it's a little interesting that, you know, are they just doing this to like, it kind of like, you know, people in Silicon Valley microdosing, like they're just doing it to like come up with new angles for how to like make more money and like conquer more of the global economy and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a lot of weird, and of course the Mellons have that same background with like Timothy Leary and all that weird, you know, in the UFO stuff. And everything from cryptocurrency
the
to
Rothschilds still, are very active. I think there's a lot of prominent Rothschilds today.
And of course the Vanderbilts, like Anderson Cooper is a primetime news host on CNN. He's the son of Gloria Vanderbilt, who made some very creepy dollhouse art back in the day that somebody was sharing on the Grotto. And just, but I have to say, I don't quite, it is kind of an open question, and I'm not really sure. I mean, it also gets back to the idea that we were talking about in the Lombardi episode about Yamashita's gold and stuff. It's kind of we're not talking necessarily about Yamashita's gold here, but maybe what we're talking about is that there's off the books assets that are not publicly acknowledged that these people actually do have, no matter where they got it from.
Yeah, there's different ways of understanding wealth, and I don't trust these Forbes lists or whatever to truly represent the mechanics of the movement of global wealth and the networks of the exchange of capital at all. Or who is at the top at all.
I have to believe that it would freak people out if the Rockefeller family was advertised as even having $3 trillion or something. That would freak people out a little bit.
Yeah,
maybe not anymore because they're progressive, but I think in general throughout the Cold War that would have been a very potentially embarrassing thing. For, obviously in the 80s and 90s, flashing your wealth became kind of cool again. But even still, it was people like Donald Trump, who wasn't even really that much of a billionaire at all, was getting kind of a hold with his gilded apartments and his private jet. That guy was the one they wanted you paying attention to. They didn't want you paying attention to Lawrence Rockefeller or whatever the hell he was doing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it makes you wonder to what extent there are these kind of celebrity billionaires, and Trump's an extreme example because he was literally a game show host on TV, kind of playing this character. But even Bill Gates is kind of acting a little bit, and Jeff Bezos is kind of acting a little bit. And so are there families, kind of interlocked families that kind of do constitute what we would call the ruling class that have a lot of capital and assets that they're sitting on that are squirreled away or laundered or don't exist in that Forbes calculation. But
and there's also this doesn't have to do with wealth, but there's definitely in a lot of the world, and it's harder to apprehend maybe in the United States, but definitely in a lot of the world, if you're from a prominent family and you just have blown all your money, and you have made nothing of yourself, if you're from the right family, you're still a god, you still have the cachet of your family name to fall back on forever,
and I mean, I've known people that come from
and it's
over
not
the years.
Totally untrue in the U.S. either, but and
I've
true in places with long established aristocracies.
That kind of incestuous kind of fuck up European royalty kind of thing of you've been in this, your family has been in this social position for 10 generations, maybe more, and you're just but I think it also is, there's a peculiarity to the American context because for the most part the wealth has been acquired through industrialism and through industrial capitalism is how, and usually what all these people do, and the Rockefellers, Bissell mentioned Standard Oil, what they really did was if you get big enough in a kind of extraction industry or something like that, or manufacturing, the real come up is that you sort of you roll those profits over into starting a bank, and then that's where you get the kind of forever money, because then you're just lending and charging interest, and you can make moves to really you kind of ascend to a new level in the economy. The Rockefellers basically owned Chase Manhattan Bank through most of the 20th century. David Rockefeller was the head of it, and that was, they were oil men. They weren't bankers, but that's the ultimate position in the capital pyramid, I guess, that you can attain, is to be one of these mega bankers. And now these banks are so vast now, though, that they're such international conglomerates that I don't know if any one or two families like controls like Wells Fargo but I guess you'd have to look at the board of you'd have to be like Lombardi and look at like the board of directors and like who still sits on the boards of all these companies.
And also like, you mentioned like this whole thing of like, you know, the myth of the individual, and like I think that's a big problem with some of this stuff, because you like a lot of the time they don't even consider families. Like if you're in a family with someone, unless like there's some horrible falling out, and even sometimes if there is, you'll always have like your mom's back if she needs help for whatever reason, and your mom certainly will always have your back, and so will your father. You know, and like you can't, like, you know, when you look at these lists of the richest people, it's always like one guy, you know, like it's not like Bill Gates' family or whatever.
It is Bill and Melinda Gates for the.
Well, that's their foundation, but in terms of like the richest people in the world, like it's just Bill Gates by himself, you know, like and they don't. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a thing, but like she's not considered to be like, you know, on the list of billionaires, like, and she doesn't have her own wealth, even though like, you know, theoretically his family could down the generations like perpetuate itself like in a point, but. The like, you know,
I mean,
you can't compare the wealth
Bezos'
of a family, like a
200-year-old
established family, to like, you know, someone who's like a new Silicon Valley upstart. It's just not the same nature, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
That one is necessarily more powerful than the other, like, or, you know, but it's a different nature. It's a different nature.
And we'll see if like the Gates children and the Jobs children and the Bezos children end up kind of going into like, you know, the tech business, you know, after their father, you know, after the way their fathers did, and maybe there will be like multiple intergenerational like dominance of the tech industry. That's possible, especially as things get more stratified, and they're going to have so many material advantages to get the most elite education and, you know, basically probably be able to do startups that are kind of, you know, kind of like George W. Bush. Like, even if they fail, maybe they'll just get used for, you know, intelligence cutouts and money laundering. like the previous ruling class did with their children. Maybe they'll go to work for the CIA. I don't know. And but I do think to some extent, sometimes they do serve as convenient rhetorical punching bags. But I don't know how much money. I would assume there is money that is like off the books, especially, okay, if we're going to entertain the idea that like the parts of the U.S. government are complicit, say, in like the international drug trade, then a lot of that money ends up getting laundered through mega banks, some of which like used to be owned by, you know, these very wealthy families, or they at least were on the board. So you'd have to wonder, like, do the Rockefellers get a taste of like the international drug money that gets pushed by the CIA? Like, I'd have to imagine the disposition of these people, which is pretty like Ayn Rand Fountainhead, like John Galt, like I did this, I deserve all my money. You know, would they really be okay with like all of it going back into just like some black, even some like, you know, black fund for the CIA or something like that? Like, are they making profit off this as well? And then if so, they would have to launder it or hide it or something like that. And so we don't know actually like the kind of the shadow economy, like how many assets do these rich families own in the shadow economy, and as well as in the above ground economy. Like, they still own, you know, shares, like they all have trusts and stuff that are invested in all kinds of different things. So as long as the system keeps humming along, they make profit. I mean, it's literally what Marx talked about as like the core of capitalism, is like people sitting around not working, earning money off their like their capital earns money for them, so they can just sit around and be elites and not do anything. That's really the high level, and that's different from even a kind of a petty bourgeois, like rich person or a professional that makes a lot of money. Those people still to some extent have to like work for a living, even if maybe they're exploiting other people below them. But this is a whole nother cast of kind of I don't know, I guess you could say Wendigos that just like have an insatiable lust for cannibalizing the wealth of other people's labor, and just can't stop. And you know, to what extent I'm inclined to say that they don't have like a Yamashita's gold level of like $60 trillion lying around, because then why would they go through all the machinations they do to start wars and traffic drugs and like make us all take a sketchy vaccine. Like, I don't know. Like why are they like trying to socially engineer us so hard if they have so much money that like they'll always be in control and like, nothing we could do could like stand up to their material resources. I don't know. Yeah, but I think there may be something there.
Yeah, no, and I do want to say on the Standard Oil point, like, Standard Oil is kind of like a, one of those skeletons in, like, those old movies where, like, those fantasy movies where, like, you knock over the skeleton and then all its bones fall apart, but they always, like, reassemble, I feel like that's kind of what's happening with Standard Oil, because, like, it got broken up into all these tiny little smaller Standard Oils, and then slowly, like, they start to reconglomerate, like,
they
one
merge
at a time.
back together.
Like, exactly.
Yeah, so
like,
now,
I remember seeing...
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say the chart. I'm looking at the chart. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chart for Standard Oil on Wikipedia, and like, it is weird. They have done a mighty job of mystifying it because basically, you wouldn't see the name Standard Oil anymore. It, quote, doesn't exist. The Seven Sisters companies that were split up in like 1911, quote, don't exist. But if you've heard of BP, ExxonMobil, and Chevron, these are all spin-offs of Standard Oil. So in a way, they're basically still around and are like 3 out of the 4, monopoly companies that control everything.
Yeah, and I remember, and actually I found a Daily Kos article attesting to this, but I remember, like, around when the BP oil spill happened, Obama had, like, sort of given the, according to this article in the Daily Kos, in the wake of BP's disastrous and criminal conduct, the Obama administration is poised to permit the reassembling of a corporation deemed 100 years ago to be too big and too corrupt. Oil industry sources were quoted as saying that ExxonMobil has been given a green light by the U.S. government to, quote, take a look at BP. A merger would create a group with a stock market value of $400 billion. Both firms refused to comment on the speculation. So I guess that didn't happen, but it definitely was, like, floated out there. And that would basically be the full, like, reassembly of Standard Oil.
Did they?
I guess they need Chevron too, but
do you think the Rockefellers maybe did the Deepwater Horizon?
That would be
that's
funny.
a question for another day.
Well, the animals laugh from the dark of the wilderness. A baby cries hard from an apartment complex as I pass in a car buried under the city's driving me out of my mind. I've seen a child get caught in that sad trap of gravity. He falls from the lowest branch of the apple tree and lands in the grass, and he weeps for his dignity. Next time he will not aim so high. Yeah, next time neither will I. Well, ABC, NBC, CBS, both, they give us fact or fiction. I think it even split in each new act of wars. Tonight's entertainment, we're still the pawns in their game as they take eye for an eye until no one can see, and we must stumble blindly for repeated history. Well, I guess we all fit into your slogan on that fast food marquee. Red-blooded, white-skinned, oh, in the blues. Oh, in the blues, I got the blues. That's me, that's me, that's me. Wow.
We should probably move on to the next question.
Right.
By Zizix.
Yeah, or Zix.
Well, I think they're referencing a strange little town in the middle of California that is called Zizix that you pass on the 5 freeway, I think. Between San Francisco and LA, but it's also spelled a little different. But I think it was a joke of making an impronounceable name because we mispronounced her first name.
Yes.
So.
Oh, this is Katicha.
Yes, which I think might have been Katie Che.
Sorry. Yeah, that maybe.
Which is a cool name. I'm sorry.
And I'm sure I got Zizix wrong too, but or maybe you got it right, but I was thinking Zix. But
or Zix, whatever.
Well, if she changed it because the last one we had trouble with, then well, I don't know if this has solved the problem, but hopefully. She doesn't take it. She doesn't take offense. Anyway, so
okay.
She asks, I had a follow-up question about the new Satanist aesthetic among young rappers. Given how young they are, and given the stats you cited about how Black Americans are the least likely demographic to be into the devil, I find it curious that so many of these young rappers have a satanic aesthetic fleshed out when they come on the scene. Do you think there's some kind of ritual encouragement or inculcation happening from the music producers or execs? Probably. Well, I don't know if it's like inculcation, but it definitely it seems like unlikely that there isn't some selection I think a lot of people have talent, the idea that the people who make it are simply the most talented, there's no one else
That's
out
a
there
lie.
who's as
That's
talented as Sa Baby, only Sa Baby can do what Sa Baby does, that I don't think is true. So I think that at some point there's someone is saying, I like this guy's style. I like how he has an upside down cross with 666 tattooed in his head. I like, how Lil Uzi Vert is telling everyone they're going to hell, et cetera, et cetera. Come to hell. You want to go to hell, pig. Let's bleed, pig. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a definite probably, because I think there is some kind of maybe ritual encouragement. I think, as Coops Danica said, it was the way he was propositioned by a record exec was kind of subtle and kind of jokey, but I don't know. Yeah, I wonder to what extent it's a feedback loop in the culture. You see other young rappers getting a lot of heat by doing or Tekashi 6ix9ine or all these people or XXXTentacion even you see that kind of happening, and then and even just the rise of trap music and its roots in Memphis horrorcore and Juicy J kind of being a little bit he smoked a blunt of death and made a deal with the devil. He's on that devil shit, and so maybe it kind of I guess culture can operate in this way in kind of a feedback loop where people start to notice that that's kind of in vogue right now, and so there's kind of a race to make your aesthetic more pronounced. And I mean, even if you look at mainstream pop music, you go to any article on Vigilant Citizen, it's Ariana Grande, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, all these other I think probably definitely Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, they're all doing monarch symbols with butterflies and sonic tiles and weird two-faced symbol and one eye shots all the time. And I wonder if people kind of subconsciously intuit that that is the cool thing to do, and so they mimic it, or I don't know, maybe
I do want to push back a little bit on, for one, I think that there is an order of difference between being explicitly satanic and some of the, because I think there might be something to some of the Vigilant Citizen stuff, but I think that some of the monarch stuff is a little two-faced symbolism that, the idea of duality, that's a pretty common, doesn't necessarily mean that it's always a reference to monarch.
I'll grant you that not every time a butterfly shows up in an episode in a music video that it's
are almost
monarch.
More reliable than some of the stuff, the idea of the duality of the human being, I feel that itself is not really substantive proof of monarch.
Yeah, but the way in which some of these videos employ things like the No Tears Left to Cry video by Ariana Grande, where she's taking off masks of her face and looking in a mirror, and she has 8 different alter masks of her face, and the camera's spinning around upside down in a disorienting way, and it's all very dark and creepy, and it's just kind of I'm
really not knowledgeable enough to evaluate. I'd have to take individual video, we'd have to do it on a video by video basis to truly evaluate whether there is something there. I mean, I do think that as we've kind of documented on the podcast, the occult and like its symbols are like a huge influence in like the world of art, like in the United States. Like Kenneth Anger, someone who we talked about as being a huge influence, particularly in the genre of the music video, like was someone who was a very avid occultist and like a huge like fan of Crowley. Like, so I think that, you know, there's definitely something to be said on that front for sure. But I do also think that there's like, you know, it's a different phenomenon from like the real explicit Satanism that you see, like, and I mean, maybe these phenomena, I shouldn't call them totally different, because there might be connection in some way, because I do think that whether there or not there's, like, a ritual encouragement, where it's like, come on, Saw Baby, like, come to the back of your, like, you know, your agent's saying, like, come to the back of my office, and we're gonna do, like, a ritual, like, to show you your true master, Lucifer. Like, I don't, like, you know, but I'm sure that they're not saying, like, hey, man, like, you know, like, it's not cool, like, how you, like, worship the devil, or, like, whatever, you know, like, or something, like, or, like,
yeah, there's definitely, you know, not, it doesn't seem to be pushback from
like,
the A&Rs and people like that at the record labels.
There's encouragement, like, man, like, you know, that's all bullshit. Exactly, like, you know, like, it's,
there seems
that's just,
to be...
like, for simple people, like, forget about these, like, you know, stupid God believers, just, like, do your art, express yourself, blah, blah, you know, like, I'm sure that, like, part of the confidence they have in defending what they say is because the people around them, like, reinforce that, you know,
because you know, there's all kinds of instances of artists wanting to go in a certain direction, and the record labels having absolute kind of authority to be like, no, especially when they're on the come up and they're like teenagers. Like, you really are kind of a little bit, as much as you might try, like, you are heavily influenceable by these people that are literally giving you like the shot and could take it away at any moment. And so there's a lot of pressure to like construct your brand in this way, or wear this, or get this kind of tattoo. And for rappers, I think, you know, like that's definitely a common thing. And, you know, I think you're right that like the myth of meritocracy is also a kind of a bullshit one in the music industry. Not saying these people aren't talented, but you know, I've always noticed that over the years, like certain people that kind of get a lot of attention and a long career. Like, I don't know, I just saw a sus picture by like Machine Gun Kelly, and it's like, like he's somebody that like I heard on the, you know, talked about in like, you know, maybe tabloids or whatever for like 10 years, and it's like I couldn't tell you one song that I ever heard like on the radio or anywhere else, and maybe I listened to one once and thought like it sucked, but like they just like, it's like he was a chosen one.
Eminem, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Again, like it just like so happens. You know, it's definitely not the case that like, you know, no one can do what Machine Gun Kelly does, or no one is as funny as Pete Davidson, you know? Like,
yes, exactly.
Like, you know, no one is as good a comedian as, or like, no one has the political analysis, like, or the understanding of, you know, Chapo Trap House. I don't know. Like, you know, like,
well, it's also, like, I thought, yeah, like the Pete Davidson thing is funny because, you know, I think the idea that like it's brave for like, you know, the entertainment industry to hire somebody with borderline personality disorder is kind of hilarious, because like how many like stars and fucking celebrities must have BPD is probably like pretty high. Like it's like as if they haven't been represented through like they're exactly the kind of people that would rise to the top in this horrible system, is like, you know, people with severe BPD. So I guess now he can be open about it or whatever, but I was a little sussed out.
Word. I mean, yeah, like, but again, the point is that like certainly there's nothing uniquely like funny about Pete Davidson, like compared to all the people like, you know, struggling in comedy clubs. I doubt he would deny that or whatever, you know. So like at some
probably
point,
right.
There's a decision.
Yeah, and who is he romantically involved with? Ariana Grande.
He got a tattoo of her like a bunny mask that he got covered up, I guess.
Which looks exactly like a Playboy bunny thing. Which, you know, it's there's a lot going on with Ariana Grande. And her her like grandfather was like a defense contractor that developed top secret sonar technology for the U.S. Navy in Florida, whose favorite song that he would always like get her to sing was "Somewhere Over the Rainbow."
Very
Well, you know what? There will be an Ariana episode one day.
Oh, okay.
Maybe within. Anyways, I think.
Yeah, I don't know about it too much. I remember that song that was literally like, the song from The Sound of Music, like that was constantly on the radio, and it's like, wow, I guess this is a new thing where like this is supposed to be a new song, but it's literally like, like all of these bad bitches are my friends.
The Seven Rings, Seven Rings one, which is even that has 7 rings, has like a weird occulty
I made up those lyrics, but that's basically what it was like. I don't think she had
these are a few of my favorite things. And I think she was dressed like a little cat or something, like crawling around with like a little cat tail and little cat ears. Yeah, exactly. It's weird. I also wonder to what extent they are aware of like the conspiracy. I think we talked about this before about like the Illuminati thing, how it's become a meme now. Where
they know about that. Yeah,
they'll hang a lampshade on it and say like, I am you think I'm Illuminati or something.
Their response is the response of certain podcasters. It's the LOL CIA response. Like, I'm Illuminati. Like they're like, I'm gonna make a bit out of it because like, even though this is a serious research podcast, like it's actually just like a fucking comedy show. Like, like time for a bit about how I am a Zionist. Like,
anyways, okay, I think we can we could move on here. We got 3 questions left. I think we can.
All right.
I think we can make this in. We're at 2:25 right now, so I think if we're good, we can make this in less than 3 hours.
All right, let's try it. Okay, let's go.
Okay,
all
so man in a predicament. A new member of the Grotto asks, would you guys be interested in doing an episode on Ted Gunderson? Is he a limited hangout, private eye, psyop dude?
All right, is the 3 hours still looking good after this one? Let's.
Well, it's not that I don't have a ton to say about Ted Gunderson, but I think we definitely, to answer directly, yes, we are going to do an episode on Ted Gunderson because he pops up in a bunch of different stories that we talked about already, including the Geraldo special that Aquino was on. He was also a guest on that and was very much, contra Aquino, no pun intended. Basically saying that, yes, there were organized satanic cult groups that were murdering people and abusing children and maybe were involved with, the military or something like that. And he is a strange character. That's the simplest way to put it. He was an FBI agent. For anybody who doesn't know, he was a former FBI agent who was kind of mid-level management. He was a special agent in charge of the Los Angeles office and also the Memphis office in either the late 60s or early 70s. I'd have to double check if he was there during the assassination of Martin Luther King, but he did admit later in life to have participated in the COINTELPRO program, but said that he regretted it in retrospect. But already that kind of makes him a little bit of a kind of suspicious figure, and he was kind of one of the main figures in the 1990s that would run around promoting things like the Monarch program, about satanic cult abuse, about even after the Satanic Panic kind of fell by the wayside in the main culture. He was really big about going around to different churches around the country. He would make VHS tapes of his recording. He used to do a whole lot of you could mail order a bunch of Ted Gunderson lectures that were on videotape, and a lot of those are still on YouTube. And I remember finding them years ago and kind of being intrigued by this guy who, unlike a lot of quote conspiracy theorists, seem to have pretty substantial credentials and the kind of authority, the law enforcement background to, the fact that he was saying that this was going on and he wasn't kind of half-stepping it. He was saying this is really going on. There were thousands of children being abducted every year. It made me kind of interested in him. But then as time went on, I think he died in 2010 or 2011, it definitely became clear that there was some funny business going on with Ted Gunderson that would suggest that maybe he was in fact a limited hangout or doing a kind of counter psyop, almost in a way that Aquino and Gunderson were, in a way, doing a kind of a kayfabe professional wrestling kind of thing on Geraldo and Oprah and all these other shows they went on. And in fact, the one thing that bears that out is I think I've listened to a lot of Ed Opperman episodes where he discusses Ted Gunderson, and he's very kind of like he knows a lot about Ted Gunderson and kind of suspicious of him. And I guess at one point he interviewed one of Ted Gunderson's ex-girlfriends, who was a McMartin parent. A parent of one of the children who accused abuse, and like while he was down there, he kind of like offered his services and got really involved in the McMartin trial, which interestingly, you know, collapsed with no convictions. And he like started shacking up with one of these like single parents or whatever, and was like, I think either she was living with him down in Manhattan Beach or he was living with her. But she mentioned to Ed Opperman that on a regular basis, like Ted Gunderson would talk on his cell phone every day, which was still new in the mid 80s, but he would talk on his cell phone every day with Michael Aquino. And like Ed Opperman asked him like, why was he talking on the phone with Michael Aquino? And she said, because he wanted to feel important. And so that's always stuck in my craws. Like, what the fuck? Like, you want to feel important? Why are you friends with Michael Aquino, bro? Like, you were sitting across from him on these talk shows saying that, like, basically, like, he's probably connected to, like, and I know in, like, his lectures and writing, I think he literally would, like, accuse Aquino all the time of being, like, the mastermind of this program, just like John DeCamp and other people, and, you know, Kathy O'Brien and Fritz Springmeier. Like, these people all finger Aquino, but yet he was, like, talking on the phone with him every day. Like,
that's very odd.
Very weird. And yeah, and he also had a heavy kind of evangelical Christian kind of bias, I think, to his the way he would construct these narratives or make these allegations about how these networks worked. And he really kind of, I mean, I think he talked about like the monarch angle, but he seemed to like really focus, maybe in his defense, he would say it was to like get these evangelical churches he was lecturing at kind of on his side to make them understand this is a demonic plot that was happening or something, or a satanic conspiracy. But it also definitely like it tainted it for the wider population that like wasn't evangelical, and probably even some that were, that like this is too wacky, this isn't real. What, George H.W. Bush is like a blood drinking Satanist, and you know they're running like child abuse networks. Like, come on. So yeah, he strikes me, and in terms of the end results he got for the culture, he didn't really seem to like produce a lot of like new information. He would just sort of show up and then like publicize what was already there, but then maybe kind of editorialize it a little bit or like put a little spin on it that I don't know. I think he deserves a deep dive. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is interesting. Yeah, I think he's a super interesting figure. And I think that there could definitely be a whole episode about him. Yeah, we should leave that question answered directly. We're going to do an episode. Was he looking to hang out, Private Eye, PsyOp Dude, maybe all three? I don't know. Maybe for Private Eye, I feel like, well, he was an investigator of sorts.
That was his technical job. He also popped up in the Johnny Gosh stuff too. I forget exactly in what capacity, but I remember it being in one of the podcasts I was listening to about it. They cast his sudden popping up as kind of weird and suspicious, and I don't know to what extent.
Weird stuff around that. Another person who weirdly popped up, Bonacci.
There might even be interactions between those two for a certain period of time. I'd have to double check that, but yeah, kind of an similar dynamic kind of going on there.
Yeah, exactly. The same kind of insider type of thing where it's like, I was there to kidnap Johnny Gosh, so I can tell you that, like, he was kidnapped by a ritual abuse network or whatever. It's like, well, like, you did it? Like, what? Like,
I mean, I'm not ruling that out. I think when we do a Johnny Gosh, like a Where's Johnny kind of deep dive, I can refresh, maybe with all this new information.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not ruling it out either, but I'm just saying that, like, if you were in fact responsible, like,
exactly, the idea that you would announce
where, like,
it.
you did it. Yeah, if you were controlled to the point that you did it, like, why should we trust you now? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing.
Or trust your choice to come forward right now.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
At this time, when you're in jail and could be maybe, like, murdered? I don't know.
Yeah, like, it's odd.
Like, Ted Gunderson is one of those people...
Whatever you believe.
Gunderson is one of those people that if, like, half the stuff he's saying is true, it seems a little odd and surprising that, like, nobody assassinated him. Because he was actually an FBI agent, and he was, had some level of authority to speak on these topics and could be taken seriously. So the idea that he claimed that people had threatened him over the years, and he had a lot of exciting stories about being harassed and all these things, but he died, I think, of maybe cancer at a kind of ripe old age in 2011. So I think even some people said like, oh, the CIA gave him cancer, but like I don't know. It's hard, really hard to tell with that. But it's that interesting thing of like, why didn't they come after him so as hard as they did with like Alicia Owen or Troy Bonner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I think moving on here, we got two more. You want to read from Ho Mama?
Yeah,
again?
sure. Let's see again from Yo Mama / Joe Mama. Thoughts on DB Cooper? The fact that it's never been solved makes the idea of it being a military intelligence or CIA guy seem probable, and I remember seeing a probable Twitter Epstein victim make a thread about it, claiming that DB Cooper was none other than William Colby. I'm not sure she ever gave any proof for the claim, but I'm not opposed to the idea. All right, maybe. I didn't read that thread.
I want to say like, this has a vibe of, I want to say, is this like Kirby Summers, that Epstein? She's I don't know, actually, she's not technically an Epstein victim, but she was a victim of somebody like Epstein and tweets about it all the time. At least there's a couple accounts like that, including Virginia Giuffre, who has tweeted like some QAnon adjacent stuff in like recent months, where
adjacent. But I really think that she didn't quite understand what she was signaling. I think that people took
that's
it
possible.
From my appraisal of it, I think that I don't know her. I don't really follow her, so I don't know. Like, I'm not to like sanction her at all. But my reading of that particular thing was that she was like, she said like, save the children or whatever, like where we go when we go all. I don't think that she knew that was saying. I think maybe she said where we go when we go all or something like that, but I don't think she knew.
Yeah, that's quite possible. That's quite possible.
It seems like maybe she didn't, She didn't say like MAGA or anything,
And
or
like
Q sent me.
Or,
I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely, I tend to believe all of these allegations about things that like directly happened to them in terms of Epstein and the people that he was, connected to, and the famous people that they were trafficked to and all that stuff. But like like sometimes I see some of these accounts, not necessarily the two that I just mentioned, but kind of like throwing out like some pretty hot kind of items about history, things like that maybe might be in the same vein as like DB Cooper was actually William Colby, and I'm not familiar.
That does kind of have a sort of like JFK Jr. is still alive and he's Q or whatever, or he's like some Trump aide, like who like vaguely not even really looks like JFK Jr. Everything has like American history has to be like an episode of like Lost or something, where it's like, oh my god, like this guy's actually JFK Jr. Like where it has to be like a Marvel movie where it's like, oh my god, like it's been Magneto this whole time, like
as wild as that would be. I mean, we just talked about William Colby. I mean, we talked about his weird involvement in Franklin. We talked about his he was legal counsel for the Nugan Bank.
Rob a bank?
That's the thing. I don't know. He would just he robs banks by like signing pieces of paper and making phone calls. He doesn't need to. That's just my impression. Is that it would, unless he was trying to relive some of his like glory OSS days as a Jedburgh paratrooper over like Belgium and wanted to like do this for the kicks. Like, I don't understand why like a former CIA director would hijack a plane. It just seems that seems kind of like a little bit of like a TV plot kind of idea.
I've always been partial to the Dwayne Weber thing. I can just Dwayne Weber identity theory for DB Cooper. He was someone who like on his deathbed said like, I don't know, I guess it just stuck with me, like his wife's account of it, like the way that she told the story of him just being like, I'm Dan Cooper, like, on his deathbed, and like, how she said, I guess it stuck with me how she said that he used to talk in his sleep and be like, no, I left fingerprints on the plane, like stuff like that. And he had like an old knee injury that he said was from a plane jump or whatever.
I personally wouldn't rule out, though, that, like, he was a military intelligence or CIA guy, like, doing it for some reason. Either he went rogue or he realized he could do this and get away with it. I don't really know, but it is, I mean, it is an intriguing case. I think, I don't know how many, like, tentacles stretch out from it necessarily that kind of make it kind of an illuminating kind of mystery story that ties. Somebody did mention something in the grotto kind of related to this about what was it called, like the Bluegrass Mafia. Oh, I'm sorry, it was the Bluegrass Conspiracy, an inside story of power, greed, drugs, and murder. And I guess there was a rich blue blood from Kentucky who had the very strange acronym for his name. I forget what it was, but it ended up being like he was like ACT the second, and so his name is like Act 2, which is kind of, I don't know, just kind of interesting from the, Andrew Carter Thornton the second, a former Lexington narcotics officer who turned to dealing drugs, and I guess he died by parachuting out of an airplane with 150 pounds of cocaine strapped to him in the mid-'80s, and $4,800 in cash, 2 automatic weapons, several knives, rope, night vision goggles, 6 Krugerrands, and keys to a plane. I guess maybe, his parachute failed, and he landed in a dude's driveway in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the plane in which Thornton was flying was discovered a few hours later crashed in a rugged mountainous area of North Carolina, unoccupied. No flight plan had been filed for it. This shocking death and plane crash brought to light revelations and allegations about a scandal involving cops, politicians, and high society in central Kentucky with drugs, weapons, and murder. This actually, I'd never heard of this book before, but it sounds really fascinating. And I guess somebody was bringing it up in, connection to, if they were doing this, and if these like blue blood drug trafficker people were doing this in Kentucky, that, I don't know, it seems a little bit like oddly similar to D.B. Cooper with a big sack of money, parachuting out of a plane, disappearing, and maybe this guy would have disappeared if his parachute hadn't failed or something. But I don't know. I don't know about D.B. Cooper. There might be, some deeper
one
connections.
Interesting wrinkle to it is that I think that that did kind of that model of plane hijacking did maybe influence people to think that's kind of what people expected when a plane was hijacked, for a long time, that they would be taken someplace and extorted or somehow in some way, that the people on the plane would be fine,
yes, that was the dramatic reversal of 9/11, where that was one of the horrors of it, because totally, in the 70s there were a decent amount of plane hijackings, and they usually would be like, we're gonna fly to Libya or something,
and a lot of them were copycats of this, because if D.B. Cooper did it, a lot of people thought that they could as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they would fly to some weird place,
It's a fascinating story. The only unsolved air hijacking in history.
Yeah.
Besides MH370, of course.
Yeah, and 9/11.
And 9/11. Definitely an unsolved hijacking.
Yes,
okay, yeah. Maybe we'll come back. I'd actually like to come back to the Bluegrass conspiracy. Maybe that'll lead us back to...
I'm open to other explanations. My take is a bit of a normie one. People might have doubts about this theory. I guess I'm not a big D.B. Cooper aficionado, but I've always been kind of leaning towards that Dwayne Weber as being D.B. Cooper, but I don't know.
I would say if it kind of pops up and intersects with any other thing that we're researching, then that might trigger, getting on the list. But I'm not like a huge stan of the D.B. Cooper mythos, though I do find it interesting.
William Colby doesn't not look like the composite sketch of D.B. Cooper, I guess.
I guess he always wears these thick glasses. If he took off the glasses, maybe, but also it doesn't super look like him. I don't know.
I guess that's true. Yeah, it does. It doesn't super look like him.
Okay, so we can move on to the final question here, which
all right, we did it.
I think we did it. All right, 2:45. So I think we're coming in, and I think we won't say as much about this because this is probably going to be a Contra chapter at some point. I think this what this question is getting at, and this is also by Joe Mama, Yo Mama, etc. And says, since you guys are going all out on Iran Contra, awesome stuff, by the way. Any chance of you guys getting? Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Yes.
Any chance of you guys getting into the South American side of things, specifically the cocaine coup in Bolivia? I read Spanish, but I don't know where to start with to get a good narrative. I think a good place to start is the peeling off of Panama from Colombia and all the skullduggery necessary to keep the Panama separate these last 100 years. Going to do some reading on my own, but anything you know that ties this stuff to your current Iran-Contra narrative would be appreciated. The Bolivian coup was in '80, just in time to massively boost the cocoa harvest in Bolivia and kick off the '80s in the style we all remember them by. Spot on. Yes, exactly. It was in 1980, and I think I also have to discover more sources on the cocaine coup in 1980, as it's popularly known, because it does intersect very directly with the Iran-Contra enterprise. And actually the first person to really alert me to it was Mike Levine, the former narc who was on the Montel Williams show that we talked about in Contra 2. The former, friend of Kiki Camarena, who was tortured to death by Felix Rodriguez, and he mentioned in one of his books, and I think he might have been even tangentially involved in a kind of narcotics undercover operation that stumbled upon this network and then was told to back off and not pursue it because it was CIA. He talks about how the cocaine coup in 1980. I think I may have slightly misspoke last episode where I said that it was Hugo Banzer was the dictator that came into power. He was actually the dictator that came in from 1971 to 78. But the thing that he had in common with Luis Garcia Meza Tejada, who was a Bolivian general who did the cocaine coup in 1980, is that they were both closely advised by the Butcher of Leon, Klaus Barbie, basically. And Klaus Barbie was a main figure in advising the Bolivian government and other South American right-wing dictatorships during the Operation Condor years in the 1970s. So SS Hauptsturmführer Klaus Barbie, who was an absolute psychotic maniac who trained the security forces in torture and disappearing, undesirable left-wing elements in the country. He was directly involved, and of course he was a node in kind of the underground Reich network, if you will, also known as Die Spinne, or the Spider Network, or Odessa is another name for it.
He was connected to Thomas Slick, of the Bigfoot guy.
He was.
Mysterious letter.
Exactly.
But yeah.
I'd forgotten what context Klaus Barbie came up in. I forgot about
there was a CIA
Bigfoot
letter. Yeah. There was a declassified letter from the CIA. They were talking about there was some allegation from Thomas Slick, who was a big Yeti hunter. His secretary had said, that there was some link between him and Klaus Barbie, and they, for some reason, published this document about Thomas Slick, saying in reference to the accusation about the war criminal Klaus Barbie. But it was unclear what the accusation was, or why. Clearly there was something that they had to do with Thomas Slick and Klaus Barbie. Probably more Klaus Barbie than Thomas Slick, because the whole thing was about denying Thomas Slick, their connection with Thomas Slick, but they didn't even bother to deny their connection with Klaus Barbie at all, or even mention it. So,
of course.
something about that was of concern to them. So,
well, once again, you get a connection between Texas oil billionaires, because Thomas Slick was like the son of the king of the wildcatters in Texas, and then of course you have George H.W. Bush coming into power in 1981, and his extensive family connections to the Nazi underground and honestly the Nazi overground in the 30s and 40s with his father Prescott. And I guess what even Wikipedia says here in very upfront terms about the 1980 cocaine coup, which I think gives a good short overall thing, is there was like a disputed election and kind of, I don't know, there was a lot of there was a lot of political chaos going on in Bolivia, which was disrupted on July 17, 1980 by the violent military coup of General Luis Garcia Meza, cousin of the deposed President Guayler, who fled the country. Reportedly financed by cocaine traffickers and supported by European mercenaries recruited by Klaus Barbie, former Gestapo chief in Leon, the coup became the rule of the first junta of commanders of the armed forces, one of the darkest periods in Bolivian history. Arbitrary arrests by paramilitary units, torture, and disappearances with the assistance of Argentine advisors destroyed the opposition. The government involvement in cocaine trafficking resulted in international isolation for Bolivia, except for the U.S. Cocaine exports reportedly totaled $850 million in the 1980-81 period of the Garcia Meza regime, twice the value of official government exports. The coca dollars were used to buy the silence or active support of military officers, but Garcia Meza, who failed to gain support in the military, faced repeated coup attempts and was pressured to resign on August 4th, 1981. So this actually happened before Ronald Reagan was elected. But according to Mike Levine, this had the CIA fingerprints kind of all over it. They wanted this coup, and a big part of it, and Klaus Barbie, who from time to time did work as a CIA contract agent, he was not only responsible for training these death squads and security forces and things like that, but he was also responsible for applying a kind of German cartel industrialized production model to the cocaine industry in Bolivia. And basically rationalize the production so that you could have massive industrial farms growing and processing this coca, turning it into cocaine, and being able to create vastly increased amounts of it, and then move it up the pipeline through Central America and sell it where else? The United States. And so what Mike Levine basically says, that was really the core. So quite literally, and then at some point, maybe it was after Garcia Meza was overthrown in 1981, that we saw the Medellin cartel rise up in Colombia next door, and then they became the mass production kind of enterprise that was growing and actually making the cocaine, and then sending it up to various Central American, criminal elements and the drug cartels in Mexico, which all had relationships with the CIA at this time, and then, again, with the help of the U.S. government, snuck into America, Mena, Arkansas, Miami, and other places. So really, it's if you can trace it back, the explosion of cocaine in the 1980s was a result of Nazi war criminals using German industrial techniques to build a mass production cocaine pipeline for sale in the United States and to fund probably anti-communist operations all over Central and South America, as well as probably Afghanistan and other places as well. And I do see here that that cocaine officially surpassed coffee as the chief Colombian export in 1982, a year after Garcia Meza was overthrown. So that's a thread I'll probably follow up. Oh yeah, look at this. At the end of 1981 and the beginning of 1982, members of the Medellin cartel, the Colombian military, the U.S.-based corporation Texas Petroleum, the Colombian legislature, small industrialists, and wealthy cattle ranchers came together in a series of meetings in Puerto Boyaca and formed a paramilitary organization known as Muerte a Secuestradores, Death to Kidnappers, to defend or MAS, to defend their economic interests, probably from the FARC, I guess, and to provide protection for local elites from kidnappings and extortions. By 1983, Colombian Internal Affairs had registered 240 political killings by MAS death squads, mostly community leaders, elected officials, and farmers. So that's kind of they funded like they farmed all these organizations that had like death squad elements attached to them. They built schools whose stated purpose was the creation of a quote patriotic and anti-communist educational environment. So there was the ACDEGAM was the Asociación Campesina de Ganaderos y Agricultores del Magdalena Medio, very long acronym. Association of Middle Magdalena Ranchers and Farmers. By the mid-1980s, they'd undergone significant growth. In 1985, drug trafficker Pablo Escobar began funneling large amounts of cash into the organization to pay for equipment, training, and weaponry. Money for social projects was cut off and redirected towards strengthening the MAS. They had computers and ran a communications center that worked in coordination with the state telecommunications office. They had 30 pilots and an assortment of fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. British, Israeli, and U.S. military instructors were hired to teach at paramilitary training centers. So I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that, like Klaus Barbie got the ball rolling in Bolivia, and then after their right-wing fascist dictator got kind of kicked out, they moved over to the next most viable place, Colombia, and teamed up with, and then you see groups like Texas Petroleum, who is now today known as, drumroll, Texaco.
Oh, wow.
Which is a subsidiary of the Chevron Corporation, which is a spin-off of Standard Oil.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. The same Rockefeller, Bush, like Texas oil kind of interests, all swirling around the building of an industrial cocaine pipeline in these South American countries. So, so that's just a little, I guess, taste of what Contra 6, 7, or 8 will be.
That doesn't even get into the Yeti connection, and who knows, it's there.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
I mean, I feel like there might be something here with, like, the Yeti, because, I mean, they can really travel, like, they can really climb over the wall easily, so, maybe that's part of the utility, but...
You're saying the ultimate drug trafficker, the ultimate drug mules?
They could be the ultimate mules, but I guess they're naked, so they don't really have any, well, I don't know. I don't know if they would do that,
I think their propensity for attacking, like, U.S. Marines and U.S. soldiers in Vietnam, throwing rocks at U.S. soldiers in Vietnam... I don't think they would ideologically be copacetic with working with these fascist drug cartels.
Yeah, you're probably right. They don't seem to be down with that. Although, they would be dangerous, and I mean this is why it's imperative that this is why the Great Race is on to master Sasquatch. That was the real arms race. But I would love to know. I would just love to know. But what Klaus Barbie knew, I would love to know.
Who did he encounter in the jungles of Bolivia and Colombia?
Who or what? That's definitely I think that definitely could be a super interesting episode. The Panama Canal is really interesting.
I hadn't thought about the Panama Canal and the battles over. Of course, there's Noriega in the 80s, who Bush literally made up a fake reason to invade to steal his stash of blackmail material that he allegedly had. That's another one that one day I'd like to get to in the next month or two, is the screenwriter with no hands. Gary DeVore, the writer of Time Cop and Raw Deal, who was found mysteriously
Time Cop.
murdered. What's that? Yeah, Time Cop.
Time Cop.
And yeah, he was found dead under very mysterious circumstances in the California desert after going off to work on a movie that was like a thriller about the invasion of Panama that was going to tell like the true story about why it happened, and it led right back to our favorite guy, George H.W. Bush, trying to cover his own ass.
Well, that was a big theme of Smedley Butler's in War is a Racket, right? Someone who sort of blew the whistle on like one of the sort of earliest or one of the most famous early 20th century conspiracy theories, the business plot,
featuring Prescott Bush and all these same people, the DuPonts.
Yeah, we should do an episode on that because I feel like there is a lot of haziness around that. Like people know like that it happened, but there isn't really, people don't understand it. Like specifically all the players involved, like Smedley Butler's career. Like there's a lot there.
It's true. I think it's a pretty remarkable document, and he's a pretty remarkable guy for the fact that he's sort of like not for somebody who's like a career military general and not a Marxist to kind of almost like through his own personal experience like realize what war actually is, in the early 20th century. Is pretty kind of impressive.
I think that a lot of them know. I think that he was maybe someone who had like a problem with it, which is to his credit. I think that a lot of people like who are like officers in the U.S. military like have some sense of what he described.
True. And then you learn to sublimate it if you want to kind of move up in the ranks and go along to get along. You learn to either get down with it or compartmentalize it in your head or come up with some kind of
or you always knew and never cared,
or just you just don't concern yourself with it. There's a lot of ways people to I'm just following orders, I don't know. I did see somebody posted the other day that like or maybe it was in the Grotto or something, I forget where I saw it, where somebody was talking about like maybe they worked for an insurance company or something that dealt with like people getting scammed, and like the biggest target audiences were like foreigners, elderly people, and military personnel, because military personnel tend to be very gullible. And which as a baby, that's not like totally across the board, but I guess it does take a certain amount of like suspension of disbelief to like exist in the military.
There's a certain they have like hammer in their head to follow orders, like to
don't ask questions if it's not need to know basis, right?
Exactly. So I think that there might be some kind of conditioning involved that causes that to happen, maybe.
For sure.
Okay. But I'm sure it's not true across the board. All right. I think we did it. I think we're under 3 hours.
I think we did it. We're just about 3 hours.
Adequate. I think a lot of these subjects will come back. They
will in a big way.
That's Q&A number 2 out of the park. First, just thank you to all of our subscribers. As we look back over 2 months now, Subliminal Jihad. Is that how long? Yeah.
I think we've been around for that's how long the Patreon's been around. I think we've been around since late August. So
yeah, that's true.
We're 3 or 4 months in, but big ups and big thanks to all the subscribers and
all the subscribers and all the listeners. Period.
All the listeners. Period. Anybody that listens to this, thanks for listening to it, and all the acolytes in the Grotto of Truth for all your stimulating discourse and your questions.
Yeah, all your questions. For sure. Definitely something valuable again. Definitely subscribe to Alwara because the Grotto is an underappreciated perk to be part of the Grotto.
It really is. Some people just throw a goofy a goofy Patreon Discord thing in there as a little bonus, but I really feel like it's become this beautifully integrated appendage.
Yeah, and everyone has a nice
podcast.
Vibe. Everyone's nice. It's like
everyone
a
is nice.
vibe. It's not like. people have lots of different views in there. You know, we got like Catholics, we got you know, lots of MLs or ML adjacent people. We got some Muslims, a couple here and there. You know, but everyone gets along pretty well. Everyone has, you know, it's got a very nice vibe, which, you know, some some Discords, you know, maybe don't have. You know, sometimes like there's you know.
Not a bunch of not like irony really poison subreddit trolls crawling out of the something awful basement talking about cum all the time. Like that's not you know, that's not the vibe in the grotto, and we love it. Is there a Cumtown
Discord? I mean, I probably wouldn't know,
it's called Twitter. No. It's called dirtbag. It's called Weird Left Twitter.
Not
that's
that
what it is.
Type of vibe. It's nice, and it's very fruitful and chill in there. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have. I mean, I guess I guess I'm in some podcast Discords. I mean, most of the ones that I'm in are also good, but I don't know what experiences people have with them. But ours definitely, I'm a fan of. You know, I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. And I think it's got a good vibe, a good discussion, raging all throughout the day as we speak. There's people discussing Burning Man and how it's sus as all get out. And the human potential movement was perfectly positioned to latch onto the NorCal tech scene as it morphed out of the universities into a business culture. And there's already been 100 emoji on that one, and I'm gonna add to it. Shout out to Bones for that. Comment.
Shout out to Bones.
So this is the kind of stuff.
Everybody.
You know, very deep stuff being discussed 24/7 in the grotto.
We also, as you know, little side perk, for the patrons, we do have links to all our show notes. It's it lags behind a little bit, but it's like a little bit behind. I update it like, you know, every once in a while, but you know, there's a lot there to catch up with. So. We do try. I'm proud to say to like actually like reference shit on this podcast instead of just being like, here's what I think. Like, you know, we try to like we try to dive into some meat and like, you know, do a little, at least a little bit of research and gather some sources and stuff that if anybody else wants to spin off and look more into, because we don't always have time to be completely thorough at the pace that we kind of record in. So we hope that, you know, with those links and stuff, maybe if it sparks, you know, some kind of insight, you know, you can run off and, you know, follow your own rabbit hole. You know?
And there's, definitely, we've just added a new channel where people will make like media suggestions because they're always popping up in the grotto, just kind of provide a place to streamline that. So I think that will be pretty fruitful. For us as well, honestly. And
I will be filling in the music citations for each episode, which I have not done yet, but I know, today with the 098 thing.
Right now, as of right now, we've released, like, as we're recording this, we've released episode, like, the last one we actually have posted is Interlock 28. So the show notes right now are at like 23, but I'll update them. But there's still a lot to go down there. You know, you can read like the whole Cotton Mather oeuvre, and we have some good links, you know, to where you can find all that material.
Totally.
So definitely do it if you like the podcast. But regardless, we appreciate your attention, and we hope that you're liking it. So
we certainly do. We'll catch everybody back next